all, and welcome to the Pacific Northwest Regional Council training event. Thanks to each of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. I'm Lori Pinard, Vice President and General Counsel for Manson Construction Company, stepping in for Melinda Martirosian, Planning Committee Chairman for this council. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for your participation. I'd like to introduce Kay Baltz, Pacific Northwest Regional Council Committee Chairman, who will introduce the rest of the speakers for this training event. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you very much, Lori. It's an honor to have you join us today. I know it's your first time with one of the council meetings, and hopefully you'll join us again another time. Good morning, good afternoon to anyone joining from the East Coast or farther points east. I guess there's not too many farther there. Usually at this point in time, we might do a quick round robin as to where people are from, but that's a little harder to do this time unless you put it in the chat so we could know where you're listening from today. I want to thank each of you. As Lori said, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We've got quite an adventure-filled package for you of training today, including CPARS and CMMC, legislative updates, navigating the new system for award management, and then we've got a panel session a little later on in the day, and then that will wrap it up. This is our second summer virtual event, and it's a definite different venue than what we used to have. Those that remember back in the old days pre-COVID, we would meet down in just out of Tacoma near Fife at this awesome place that had the most fantastic buffet breakfasts and lunches. So this time, I hope you made your lunch so you're ready to eat it and join us with your camera off, of course. I think Ms. Pam Monroe, she is going to be sharing information about the liquidated damages and CPARS. Ms. Monroe, are you ready to take it away?
Yes, I am.
So Ms. Monroe joins us from the Department of Army, and thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead and share who you are and what you do.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, good morning and afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm on the East Coast, so it's afternoon time here in Maryland. And I am Pamela Monroe. I am the Assistant to the Director at the Headquarters Army Office of Small Business Programs. I am currently the Subcontracting Program Manager, as well as the Indian Incentive Program Manager. Will be speaking today on CPARS. I am actually taking the place of my good friend who was unable to make it at the last minute. So I'm going to try to do him well. I will try to do my best and represent him well. And so without further ado, I will get started. So what is CPARS? The Contractor Performance Assessment Reporting System. Next, please. Thank you. And as you see before you, what CPARS is, it's a web-enabled application. It does collect a lot of data. I'm also going to talk about the CPARS roles. Oh, okay, he went back. Okay, so here's the definition for CPARS. And next. Thank you. CPARS role. You see you have the assessing official for representative, the assessing official contracting officer, the reviewing official, and the contractor representative. Next slide will just give you a definition of what these roles encompass and what is required out of each individual from the core, the KO, the reviewing official, the contractor representative, and a focal point. Now, I will say that This is going to be a broad briefing. So some of you may or may not have a focal point. I'm not sure. But this is with some of the agencies where they do have a person responsible for managing all the CPARS roles. Next, please. Thank you. The evaluation status on CPARS. The registration, where there's no, it's registered, the contract is registered, but there's no evaluation to be initiated. You have the initiating where they're waiting for individual. A draft is always good where an individual will at least do a draft CPAR so you can review that. You have the rating and then it's reviewed by the contractor rep. And I'm going to also talk about what avenues that you will have in the event you are not happy with your CPAR's rating. And then you have the finalized and completed. Next. All right. When and why CPARS? When, the evaluations are due every 4 months after completion of the annual contract performance. And yes, we do know that does not always take place, but these are the rules and regulations that they are to follow. And 1 month before that period of performance ends, CPARS will notify the Corps to initiate evaluations. And if you're having issues with that and you do have a focal point, please call your contracting officer or your focal point to find out if your CPARS is going to be implemented timely. And then you have the why CPARS. When CPARS is completed, the contractor performance information is available for public use for us to review, just to see how you're doing for any future awards. And when completed timely, it shows the proper contract administration and oversight. Incomplete CPARs are counted against the agency and they will not support proper contract administration was performed. So it is imperative to not only ensure that you've done the CPARs, but you've completed them and you've done them timely, because this can stand between a contractor getting a contract or not. And it's usually on the government side when we're not sending in the information timely. Next, please. Next slide. How to evaluate CPARs. The evaluation areas are before you, and then you have your ratings of exceptional, very good, satisfactory, marginal, and unsatisfactory. And I'll go over those ratings and the buzzwords that they're looking for when the ratings are actually completed. Next slide, cpars.gov. I hope everyone is familiar with this. I know this is one of the new things that, well, it's not new, it's pretty much new to me because I don't do CPARs anymore. However, cpars.gov provides a lot of good information for you. And when you log in on that site, they do have a lot of step-by-steps that can be taken to complete your CPARs. Next, the login screen tells you what you're going to be doing next and how you, okay. Then next one, the home screen. And it'll let you know if you have any pending actions in CPARs. Next slide. The contractor information is there, followed by the contract information. So I have the contractor information and the contract information is in there for you to start inputting your CPARs review. Miscellaneous. If you want to put notes, I've talked to some contracting officers and they put notes in there to give themselves reminders of what they're going to, what they want to also add at the very end, and just little notes to themselves. And the small business subcontracting. Does this contract include a subcontracting plan? And you please ensure that if it does, we do click yes. Sometimes some processes are skipped, but we want to ensure that definitely if there's a subcontracting plan in there, you have that, and this will tell you how to select it. Then you have your ratings on the next one. Next slide. Again, exceptional, very good, satisfactory, marginal, and unsatisfactory. Now, when you do your evaluation of ratings on the next slide, these are the definitions for exceptional, very good, satisfactory, marginal, and unsatisfactory. I know at times when contractors get their ratings, they want to know, well, I thought I did exceptional or very good, and all I received was a satisfactory. So in order to get an exceptional, it needs to meet, exceed, few minor problems, and highly effective. If you meet all of those criteria, then yes, an exceptional should be given. And we also have to justify those exceptional ratings when we, just a minute here, when these are given. For very good, you meet, but you exceed some. You have some minor problems and appear to be in the satisfactory modes, but you have to justify, again, your ratings. And these are examples or how you would use these when you are given your CPAR ratings. You have the marginal that does not meet some serious issues, and marginal effective or were not fully implemented. But again, every time you receive a CPAR rating, the contracting person has to justify that rating for you. Unsatisfactory, you just didn't meet anything, pretty much. Did not meet most of the contractual requirements, and pretty much you were ineffective. Next slide. Okay, and then you have the assessor tab. The assessing official comments will also go in this tab. So everyone has a part in CPARs, and everyone should be inputting information when it comes to reviewing the final contract review. And then the horizontal tab just provides additional information for you. So next is sample CPAR narratives. So the contractor is exceptional. They continuously provide high quality training and services. Is that sufficient information? Yes or no? It's not sufficient. The contractor is exceptional. They continuously provide high quality training and services, but there's no detail to support the rating. It does not tell your entire story, and nor do you have supporting documentation or any metrics to try to justify giving them an exceptional rating. So this is something we have to be very careful when we do these narratives, that it supports an exceptional with the criteria that I showed you earlier. And if it does not, then you really can't support an exceptional rating when it goes to the next set for review. Next slide. Now, here's an example of sufficient when given an exceptional rating. They provided quality service. We're looking at detail that they provided per month. You have some metrics. You're able to show that in 3 months or more, they were, the type of training they provide. They do tell a story, and they do have the documentation to support this. So the more details you put in a narrative, the greater chance you have for a good exceptional rating and justification. And as Mr. Owl says, actual narrative should go into even greater detail. All right, another one. In our opinion, the contractor has done really well in terms of schedule, and you can read the rest yourselves. And then they put in, and great job. Is that sufficient information based on what you're reading now? Is that a yes or a no? Next slide. No. What is missing? Detail to support the rating, metrics, additional issues, using the individual's name. And you don't usually put in your narrative, great job. And it's pretty much, he's pleasant and easy to work with. Well, that's nice, but how did he do the work? What did he do? He went above and beyond and fixed our printer and fax without charging the government. Does that qualify for a very good rating? Okay. Now, sample narrative, statements to avoid. Never give your own opinion. In our opinion, in my opinion, I think, we think, we did not like how they did this. And we're not happy. And just a litany of statements that you really should not put in your narrative, because it's more objective. You need to put things in there that they did that you can qualify, you can tell the story, you can support the rating, and detail, detail, detail. Next slide, please. All right, here's another example. Successfully executed. Oh, I'm sorry, next slide. There we go. I'm sorry, that was me. Can you please go back? I'm sorry. Successfully executed delivery and training. Again, they have numbers on how many training site visits they did over a period of time. They were able to provide days, 45-day time frame versus the 60 days allotted, which is always good if you can get something done quicker than what the contractor says. And other things such as implementation of an aggressive quality management system. So they provided a lot of detail in this one. They provided some time. They provided how many days they were able to complete projects. So again, the more details, and if you could provide the metrics like they did in this one, you can actually support a very good rating. But we have to remember, we have to take our time in doing this, and we know it's time consuming. And however, this is very important to contractors. And I know contracting officers and contracting specialists, yes, we do get tied up in trying to get on to the next project, but it does take some time and some thinking, and that's why you need to start doing this as the contract is progressing, and not wait to the very last minute to try to do the CPARs. So the next one is the contractor exhibited marginal management of key personnel. And actually, you can read this. I won't read that to you. And based on what you're reading, with the metrics that they provided, some details, what the instructors experienced, turnovers, or just general information that's in here, do you feel that this is sufficient for a marginal rating? Okay. There you go. So they have the details to support rating, documentation, corrective actions, and objective language. All right, next slide. Now, I know we've also gotten questions on when the rating doesn't reflect the actual performance for CPAR's disagreements. And these are some, I'm going to provide just some information that you can use if you are not satisfied with your CPAR ratings. And you feel that the AO contains inaccurate or unsupported information, and there's some areas that was not covered. And these are things that can provide the disagreement. That's why you want to make sure you have covered all of these areas. So when handling a CPAR's disagreement, you have the 14 days to respond, and you have the contractor rep that can submit the comments assessing the AO's rating. And then you have your reviewing official. If the contractor disagrees after the RO signs the CPAR, the contractor may request a contracting officer's final decision. Next one. For the government's best practice, on our end, we just need to follow a few of these simple steps. One is definitely consider providing a draft CPAR, and then understand the issue and its relationship to the contract requirements. But most importantly, just make sure that you keep a good track as the contract progresses. This has been a lot of calls that we get, especially from small business contractors, that the CPARS is done at the very end of the contract. And there were several things that the company may have done that was not in the CPARS review, that was not taken into consideration. So it just made it look as if, even though the contractor may have done exceptional, excellent work, they received a satisfactory because not everything was taken into consideration what was done. So it is important that we do take time to assess the contract and then let them know where they're not doing well before you get to the very end of the contract. The contractor's best practice, definitely strive for exceptional performance. I don't know of anyone who's going to say, I think I'll just do a mediocre performance. Document all your successful performance such as early deliveries, which is very important, and performance that exceeds the requirement. To me, that is extremely important for any contractor, to make sure you detail everything that you've done. And if you do have periodic meetings with the contracting staff, make sure you bring this up to ensure that, oh, here's a reminder, these are the things that I've done. And know your own CPAR rules and regulations. So when you go to a meeting, you know what you're talking about. And again, challenge ratings and narratives using the FAR and CPAR guidelines. That is within your right to do so. Next slide, please. Pretty much in summary, the government and contractors definitely should work together to achieve successful outcomes. Use the CPAR process to ensure ratings and narratives are accurate and fair. And then when there are disagreements, strive to correct the record. So all of these are definitely tidbits that we can use to ensure that we are doing what we are supposed to do to ensure everyone has a successful CPAR rating. Now, next one. Challenging final CPAR decisions. These are just some cases that came up that a contractor cannot challenge the substance of a CPAR through a bid protest. The next one. Here's one from the Court of Federal Claims and Boards of Contract Appeals can consider challenges under the Contracts Dispute Act. And here's some cases. Next slide. Injunctive relief is unavailable. and you could try to seek monetary damages or declaratory relief. Now, what we do need to remind ourselves on the government side is to complete the CPARs in a timely manner. One of the biggest issues that we do get from some contractors, large and small, is they don't know who's conducting their CPARs, who's going to do their review. If if that government official is no longer there, and that's the person that you were working with at the beginning, you call your call your contractor and just say, I'm leaving, here's my new person, here's your new point of contact. The biggest complaint they have, they don't have a point of contact, and we're not telling them when we're transferring or we're no longer in that position. And if you have the opportunity to even complete their CPARs, if you can do that or write notes before you transfer the file, that's even better. We've had some contractors who weren't able to been on the contract, let alone be awarded, because the CPARs wasn't done in their file. And so therefore, it was something that they knew they could do, but the CPARs wasn't completed. So please try to get those CPARs in, contact the contractors when you're leaving or someone else's, or you're transferring the file to someone else. Do that time. So we need to make sure that on both sides that everyone is maintaining accurate notes. Make sure that there's a place in the CPARs.gov where you can keep those little notes as a reminder to yourself. But again, past performance is a big issue with CPARs when they're not maintained. And as you see, once everyone does their part, then we will all be successful in CPARs. And my office won't get any phone calls about CPARs not being done correctly. So now I understand that Mr. Taylor was also going to briefly talk about liquidated damages in subcontracting on the 52219-16. I'm just kind of curious, how many of you have actually implemented the liquidated damage clause? Oh, I can look in the chat real quick. I know it's in there. The clause is normally in there, but has anyone actually implemented the liquidated damage clause? And if you have, were you successful? Did it come to a protest? Well, I will say I also am the SBA ombudsman point of contact for my office. And we did get a case where the liquidated damage clause was implemented, but the contracting officer did not tell the contractor that they were going to do that and just took the money away. So if you are going to do this, you need to let the contractor know that, large or small. Let them know that you are going to do that, because it surely came as a surprise to the contractor when he did not get his full payment. So we need to make sure we do that and then explain why. A lot of times they don't understand why they're not getting their full payment and why we are assessing assessing liquidated damages. But I'm not going to read the whole thing, 52219-16, but it does tell you a way how you could apply a percentage goals to the total actual subcontracting dollars. And that is a way of assessing it. We just don't decide, I'm just going to take an amount from you, but at least have a system that you're going to implement and let them know before you even award the contract, or when you meet with them, this is how we would do this in the event this happens. Okay. So now with respect to the liquidated damages, If you have any other questions, let me know. You know, it is written up on how we can do it. And it is based on good faith effort. And they're getting, as we know, SBA did come up with the definition of good faith effort on how we are going to assess this and it's not what we think is good or it's not our objective opinion. Again, you have to have details when we assess the liquidated damage clause. So that is all I have right now. If there are any questions, you can please contact me. That is my email address. My phone number will transfer to my office, office cell, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any after this. I thank you for your time. And Kay, thank you for the opportunity to present.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to let you off the hook that fast. There's actually a couple questions for you in the chat. One of the questions, can you confirm that the government will review FSRS to confirm that the contractor has submitted monthly reports to comply with Federal Funding and Accountability Transparency Act? And then a comment, we have trouble getting some first-tier subcontractors to provide the FFATA required information, and it would be helpful for us to advise them that their compliance or not reflects on our CPARS rating.
Oh, okay. Now, yes, Pamela, can you confirm that the government will review FSRS to confirm that the contractor has submitted monthly reports? Yeah, we should, they should. They could confirm that the government will review FSRS. You know, I would think they would. And I will get back with you to confirm they are reviewing FSRS. I know they're going into, I know we're reviewing, they are looking, we do review some of the ESRS information, but I can find out for sure if they do that and that the government is reviewing FSRS.
Thank you. Got
Yeah.
a comment in here. I think it's a good, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I will take that down. That has come up before FSRS.
Hey, Kay, this is Mike Gilbert. I've got a comment I think that maybe could help answer this question.
Okay.
And putting on my contracting officer hat here, for those that don't know, I'm the Director of Business Operations at Fairchild Air Force Base. And I can tell you that, yes, it is a contractual requirement that the contracting officer, in doing their annual review, for sure, should be ensuring compliance with FFATA as part of their annual review. And also in terms of their annual or overall rating and how that could play into certainly future procurement. So for sure, subcontractors should be getting after FATA reporting. And I would encourage the primes to, feel free to use this data to get after it. So compliance is required and they have to do it just like the primes.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, I want to share a comment that came across that I think is a good comment. Recommendation, obtain an agreement on how exceptional performance could or will be achieved.
Okay, and you can also use the definition of what we have for exceptional performance too. And if you meet that criteria, then, and you follow everything that's in there and that you're doing, then you should. But that's not a bad idea. If you and the contracting office can come up with an agreement, and also as you are progressing, ask for meetings. How am I progressing? Am I falling short? Because this is your livelihood and you do want a good rating. And that is very important to everyone. So as long as they're working with you and you follow along and they're doing the same thing, that I don't see a problem with that. But check with your contracting officer and your contractor, but I think an agreement it's okay.
Well, thank you. Okay. Another question. Can small businesses engage the Sabrifa Ombudsman if they disagree with the ratings assigned?
With the Sabriva Ombudsman, I have to tell you, you can call your, I'll tell you this, you have the opportunity to talk to your ombudsman, your SBA ombudsman, if you have any type of disagreement with what you receive. Then they will get in contact with the headquarters office, and then we will get in contact with the cognizant office to discuss what you about your disagreement.
Thank you. Another question. Is there a requirement for primes to ensure lower tier provide FFATA reports?
Oh, on the Funding and Accountability Transparency Act. That is something that I will talk to DoD, OSBP, because we have talked about the Funding and Accountability Transparency Act. To confirm that the contractor has submitted monthly reports to comply with the federal. We have trouble getting some first tier subcontractors to provide required information. It would be helpful for us to advise them that their compliance reflects on their CPARS rating. Let me find, can I get back with you on that? I will bring that question up.
Pamela?
Yes.
Hey, Lori Pinard here from Manson Construction. I'll just point out that there is a federal acquisition regulation, a FAR, on this topic.
Mhm.
And my response, although I'm not you, is that contractors have an obligation under that federal acquisition regulation to gather the information from lower tier subcontractors and submit that information in FSRS. So I would just encourage the question asker to review the FAR on that to learn more.
And the other thing that we have to put this in our training, and when the small business officers are doing the training, because when this did come up, some of the small business specialists as well as contractors weren't aware of this.
Yeah, so I will just say out loud that the FAR is 52.204-10. And I know Melinda, for our part, has been very much involved in encouraging and trying to educate the subs she comes in contact with about that requirement. But we do struggle with that. We send out the forms asking subs to provide information, and they're highly offended and object to why we would ask for that information, and we point them back to the FAR and say, you know what, it's the law, sorry. So
right. And
appreciate your support.
Yes, and what I can do when we have our subcontracting program managers meeting with DoD OSBP is put this in as a topic of discussion to ensure that everyone is aware of this, and that when training is being done, provide as much information on that, the FAR clause, and to let subs know that this is out there. But I know when it was first brought up, a lot of people weren't, and I was one of them when it came up. I was not aware of this. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Excellent discussion. Thank you. I appreciate the communication and the opportunity to discuss through the chat as well. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
Okay.
And please know, when we ask the questions today, it's not a guarantee we'll get the answer immediately. Sometimes we have to go back and research a little bit so we can be sure that we give you the right answer. So please, if you've got a question, ask away. We will get you the answer. It just might not be this minute.
Yes.
And Kay, this is Dave Walls from Newark Keyport. I did also want to just point out, and I'm sure Yuri Dyson might be touching on this later on today, but the Federal Register sent out an update. It's going to be a final rule to FAR 19705-7, which touches on liquidated damages. It does say failure to make a good faith effort to comply with the plan may result in assessment of liquidated damages. And that final rule is going to take an effect September, I believe, 11th or September 10th or September 11th. So that language is being put in the FAR. There's also going to be language on what makes up good faith effort, which will help the contractors and as well as us when we're doing our assessment of those ISRs.
Yes, and it is coming out, and I work with my policy person in the office, so I always ask her what is coming out and when, and she'll just say just basically what you said. Yes, it is coming out, and she said, but don't give the date yet because we don't know. So, but
Well,
yeah.
it came out yesterday, and it says takes effect September 10th, I believe is what it says. You can double check, but I believe that's what it says.
Yes. So, and it's also good to finally have a good definition of good faith effort published. So,
Excellent, thank you. And yes, during legislative updates, we will have, let's see, we will mention good faith effort on subcontracting plans in the regulatory update portion. So stay tuned.
excellent.
Any other questions,
But I
comments?
didn't see anyone who actually implemented the liquidated damage clause. No one said they've done it. At least I can't tell from the.
Or maybe another question would be, has there been anyone who's been on the receiving end of having it
That was going
implemented?
to be the next one. Who's been on the receiving end of having liquidated damages assessed? Okay. No. All right. Okay.
All right. Well, Ms. Monroe, thank you so much for being willing to pick up this topic and run with it. I know it was kind of a last minute change for you, and I sure appreciate your flexibility and your willingness to support. Gosh, I guess to show a round of applause, I guess, can we all just raise our hands? I'm not sure that we've got a clapping emblem on this. But so thank you very, very much.
Have a successful brief meeting today. Thank you.
We'll be ready to move into our CMMC Project Spectrum training. Looks like we might even be just a few moments ahead of schedule. Let's see here. Okay, I see we're on screen. Great. Okay, this is good. Are you ready and willing to run in ahead of schedule?
Yes, ma'am. By all means. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, then I'm going to pass the torch right on over to you. Good morning to those on the West Coast, and good afternoon to those that are farther east. And I guess good morning to those that are out in the Pacific Ocean as well. Welcome back. Thank you for returning to us and joining us once again for the second half of our Pacific Northwest Regional Council training session for the summer. I greatly appreciate everyone's time and attention. Hopefully you've gained some good nuggets of information from this morning's trainings. We're going to move on to the afternoon session, and we have Ms. Yuri Dyson. She is with the SBA, and she does a wonderful job of sharing information on legislative updates. And I'm sorry, I've got a little voice in the background there that just showed up. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Yuri and let you take on and do what you do so well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, everybody. This is Yuri. Hopefully, I'm assuming you can see and hear me. Is that correct? Want to make sure that that's all working before I dive in.
I can see and hear. Anyone else?
Great. All righty. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. Let's see here. Oh, looks like another participant is sharing. Okay, maybe I'll give it another try. Here we go. All right, so you should be able to see the slideshow, and I'm just going to dive in. But before I do, I wanted to just let you know I decided to share the fun today. Yeah, I think we're all just kind of missing seeing friendly faces, and Randy Miller, my colleague in Anchorage, is so much fun to work with. And I just realized that he actually did this presentation, the spring version, for you all in April. But I thought I'd bring him in too, just for fun, so you could see another friendly SBA face. And so I'm going to take on the first half of this update for you, and then Randy will be taking care of the second half. So you'll have both of us. But I'm so glad we could get together, even if it's virtually, so that we can do this and still stay connected. So here we go. So the legislative and regulatory updates as of today, and there have been some updates since Randy presented this topic in the spring. Some of what you see here is going to be some refresher though, so just wanted to make you aware of that. And maybe that'll be okay, because some of you might not have been able to join back in April. So we have some executive action that happened at the beginning of this year that's I found kind of good to look back on as I was preparing these slides for you today. There's the executive order that was issued January 10th on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities. And then also an executive order around that time about ensuring that we're using products that are made in all of America by American workers. Each of these is different in various ways from Buy American Act. And so it's important to kind of recognize that. The first one, advancing racial equity, has a lot more to do with what the federal agencies are supposed to kind of do an internal review of whether or not we have policies or procedures that are barring some elements of our society from fully participating. And so it's kind of an introspective look. And I believe OMB is supposed to be getting involved with that. There's going to be a special committee stood up to do this. I haven't explored this since the spring, so I'm not sure what sort of progress has been made on it, but just I think good to remember that these executive orders were signed in January. Hopefully eventually we'll be seeing some developments from those. And then there was also an executive order in February about America's supply chains. I think I had a couple of notes on that, and now that I shared my screen, I can't seem to see my notes here. Oh well, that's all right. So let's go on to the next slide here. So recent SBA and federal regulatory action. Again, these are probably some things that you heard back in the spring. 8A participants, because of COVID, their 8A programs, which are typically 9 years, has been extended by 1 additional year. This is huge because the bedrock of this program has been that they get all these benefits, but it's only for the 9-year period. By the end of the 9 years, they're supposed to be fairly competitive on the federal marketplace without using the 8A contract program. But because of COVID, because of the impacts it made on the businesses, as well as a lot of federal operations, I think we all have experienced that as large primes and federal agencies. It was recognized that the 8A firms deserve to have an additional year added on because it was just so strange these last 12 to 18 months. So firms that were already in the program, they were automatically extended by 1 year. And then there was even a provision made for firms who had recently graduated that if they could confirm that they are still eligible for the 8A program, they haven't suddenly become large, or they haven't had some recent changes in their ownership to where they don't have a disadvantaged individual in the majority position anymore. If they can claim that they are still fully eligible in accordance with the 8A rules, then we would consider bringing back in a recently graduated 8A firm so that they can take advantage of this extension too. So I've yet to talk with some firms who've been able to enjoy this feature. I'd especially be curious to talk with some recently graduated firms to see if they've been able to pick up some contracts even during COVID. So if I hear of any, I'll share them with you. So the next several slides are going to talk about a whole raft of changes, huge changes that Randy kind of spoke about in the spring regarding the mentor-protege programs that SBA has. So you might recall we've had for a long time an 8A mentor-protege program that was kind of coveted by other small businesses until the point several years ago when SBA developed the All Small Mentor-Protege program, which was basically a twin of the 8A's Mentor-Protege program. And it basically set up guidelines and rules about how SBA approved mentor-protege agreements, excuse me, would allow for development of small businesses and protect the small businesses as well. And that's exactly why the mentor-protege regulations in CFR are written the way they are. We don't want mentors to partner up with small businesses just because they might want to take advantage of the small businesses certifications and have that large business participate or be involved in small business reserved contracts through the federal government. So, this was, I think, a really great boom to small businesses because despite all the programs that SBA has to help small firms in the federal marketplace, we really didn't have anything that provided industry-specific knowledge for the 8A firms or other small businesses. And in my mind, the mentor-protege program and then the joint venture program along with it are perfect ways for a smaller business to get that very industry-specific knowledge that's needed for businesses to grow, especially in the federal marketplace. So as you'll see here, I'm just kind of going to go a little bit quickly through the next few slides. You'll see that there are various changes that were made. Some of them were to simplify the program. Others were to help protect the integrity of the program a little bit more closely. But the biggest thing for you to take in is that basically the 8A mentor-protege program and the All Small mentor-protege programs have now been merged. So they're one and the same. There's not a special one just for 8As anymore. It's all the same for all small businesses. And it just made sense because the regulations really were twins of one another, except that in one set said 8A and the other set said all small. So here we'll just go through these slides real quick. The joint venture rules were also somewhat simplified too. There used to be a rule that a joint venture where the JV was approved by SBA could only win up to 3 contracts in a 2-year period. So those JVs can only last for 2 years. And not only that, according to the old rules, that joint venture could only win up to 3 projects. Well, that could be kind of stifling if a joint venture was, had some really great skills and were successful. So that maximum cap of 3 contracts in 2 years was taken away. So the JVs can win, they can accept as many joint venture awards as they can get, and within that 2-year period. But those JVs, again, can't last more than 2 years. They're not meant to be entities that last forever, because again, the SBA wants to make sure that those joint ventures are there for a particular set of developmental goals for that small business. And we figure within 2 years, those goals should be achieved. If not, then the parties can apply for another joint venture and tweak those goals and show SBA, maybe how the goals will be a little different this time. But there does need to be a progression of development for those firms. So again, very industry specific experience and assistance that mentor firm or the larger firm is providing to the smaller one. Okay. So let's see here. Consolidation still here. And this was effective last November. And then it also kind of touched on the 8A program on its own, defining what a follow-on requirement is. Sometimes that's hard for agencies to figure out if a new project they have in mind is basically the same as a previous 8A contract that they offered to SBA, or is it different enough that they don't have to ask SBA to release the contract? Because as you may know, once a project has been accepted into the 8A program, any future projects of that same kind are supposed to stay an 8A project. We need those projects to stay in there so that we continue, SBA can continue to provide those working opportunities for the 8A firms. And it may not benefit the very same firm that got it the last time. We're constantly getting new firms into the program. So even if, let's say, you're an agency and you've had an 8A project for a number of years and your 8A firm has graduated, the mere fact that they've graduated does not mean that automatically you'll be allowed to compete it on the open market. There is a process and you would need to go through that process with SBA. And we'll do our best to make sure that we can help you follow the rules. But there's some other updates you see here where we were trying to simplify or shore up some protections of the 8A program. Again, quite a lot of changes here. Okay. So another one here about, we used to require that their business plan be approved before we allowed them to get 8A benefits, including an 8A contract. Now we've loosened that requirement. Okay, and we keep going on with this final rule. Bona fide place of business. This is something that's been churning a lot lately. I understand from my colleagues who work closely with the 8A program, the definition of a bona fide place of business has always been kind of tricky. But then there were some updates made recently by SBA, but unfortunately, it seems it's kind of clouded the matter somewhat. So there's going to be continuing updates on this. If you're dealing with an 8A firm who is struggling with a bona fide place of business, do let me know, do let someone at SBA know, and we can do our best to help. But I do know that this is kind of a developing story. So because there were so many regulations changed, added, deleted, And if you know FAR and the regulations at all, you know that they're very much intertwined. You know, something will mention another regulation over here, and it's almost impossible to try and pick up one of those spaghetti noodles and not have it affect the rest of the plate. But it was curious because I just realized in doing some research that, you know, this earlier Federal Register notice, let's see here, whoops, let me go backwards here. Okay, so this one, 66146, which was effective last November, it had so many changes that between then and now, you see this brand new one that's effective just a couple weeks ago, there have been 4 corrections to various things that were revised or changed in this final rule for the consolidation of the mentor protege programs. So I think even for SBA, it was a huge effort to try and get all these changes out there correctly and do a complete job of it. So the one you see here is the 4th correction. We wanted to clarify about joint ventures and at what point in the procurement process we determine the size of the joint venture, because it can get very granular. Joint ventures, you know, they have a life of their own, and when you have a life, you know, things can change from moment to moment. There's also questions that we were trying to clear up about affiliation and women-owned small business subcontracting, the bona fide place of business, which is still kind of churning, and then business activity targets for the 8A firms. So very active time. I think in, you know, I joined SBA in 2012, and I would have to say the last year or 2 have probably been the most active in terms of regulatory updates that I've seen just in my short career with SBA. I'm sure if we spoke to someone who's been with SBA for decades, they'd probably agree it's been pretty active recently. So, okay, I know that this was discussed in the spring too, but I wanted to touch on it again because it has such a huge impact to all of you in the virtual room, to the agencies that you know, are looking for women-owned small businesses and want to know if they're certified properly or not, and then to the large primes who need to work with a certain percentage of women-owned small businesses, and how does that work where the certification process has changed? What do you as a large prime need to look for? So let's take a look here. Essentially, the self-certification process that we used to have for a number of years is gone. The only exception is if it's a women-owned small business who is only participating on a subcontract level to a large prime. In that case, their self-certification, as it's been for a number of years, is satisfactory. It will meet the requirements. And you as a large prime can, in good conscience, say that yes, you do have a women-owned small business. So whatever processes you've used in the past to vet these women-owned small businesses, I believe you can still use. These firms that you're using as a women-owned small business sub do not have to go through the process I'm about to highlight here, which is the new one. And this process, it kind of became effective in stages. It began in July of last year, where we were no longer allowing firms to upload documents to the repository, the SBA Women-Owned Small Business Repository. And we were giving them a deadline, firms a deadline, that by October 15th of last year, they would need to apply formally on an SBA website for an SBA certification as a women-owned small business. So an application package done all online, where SBA will vet the firm's particular eligibility documents, and then come out at the end, hopefully, with a certification. And there's a certification congratulations email that's sent out and a certification number. That is a whole new process, and firms have the ability to apply in this new process starting in October 15th of last year. So, well, actually, they had the opportunity to start applying in July, I should say, but SBA didn't actually have their Women-Owned Small Business Program office where they were actually processing these applications. That didn't actually begin until October 15th. So, as you can imagine, there was quite a backlog because so many women-owned small businesses wanted to make sure they were taking care of this and they didn't lapse at all in any eligibility. And that ended up with a huge amount, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of applications that were in the system by the time the Women-Owned Small Business Certification Office, which is a whole new group of folks at SBA, and there's only several of them. When they woke up on October 15th and opened things up and realized, okay, we've got a lot of applications to process. So unfortunately, it has been somewhat slow, but there are some details here that I think are important for you to know with that fact. So let's see here. The third-party certifier feature is still there, but a huge caveat so that you, the federal buyers, and the large primes understand, if a small business is working with a third-party certifier, that's okay. But once their third-party certifier does their process, usually they issue a particular certificate from their organization to the firm. That's not the end of it for SBA certification. I've run into several women-owned small businesses who thought that was it. That was all they needed to do. And were very disappointed to learn, oftentimes during evaluation on a women-owned small business set-aside, that they still needed to go through the formal application process in the SBA system to receive the SBA certificate. Now, if they have a third-party certifier certificate, that does relieve them of quite a chunk of the documentation they would normally have to submit in the SBA system for women-owned small business. But it is important that they still go through that online application at SBA so that they can get the SBA certificate at the end. So please communicate this with your firms if you hear about that, or feel free to refer them to us. Okay. So this is just kind of a review of how firms can get certified, what happens with their repository documents. And again, self-certification remains for subcontracting credit and subcontracting goaling purposes. But for the federal agencies, only the formal women-owned small business certification will allow you as a federal agency to take credit for award to a women-owned small business. Okay, and then let's see here. It's a 3-year cycle for the application. They do have to re-up after 3 years. We need to make sure that these women-owned small businesses still are eligible. We can't have people who aren't eligible participate in this program. And then there used to be kind of an appeal process if a firm was declined, but now that tended to complicate the process. So now we're telling folks that they can reapply within 90 days. That way we don't have kind of a limbo group of firms that are appealing their declinations of being declined the certification, as well as firms that are submitting fresh applications. We decided to simplify that and just tell folks, if you were declined today, you can just reapply in 90 days. So. And then there's also been, some concern about how some of the third-party certifiers are doing their part of this. So we've developed some new oversight procedures for that. So I think, let's see here. Yes, we've got a bit more here. There were also some dollar thresholds for disadvantaged individuals amongst the different socioeconomic programs that were a little bit different from program to program. So that was another update that SBA felt was needed to be more straightforward and help users like all of us, be able to understand the programs better. So there's the $750,000 personal net worth standard for economically disadvantaged individuals in the 8A program. And then that will now match what we had in the economically disadvantaged women-owned small business program. And then we also, made it identical to say that in both programs, qualified retirement accounts are not counted towards the individual's personal net worth calculation. We know that, those retirement accounts have severe penalties for people touching them before it's the right time. So we don't see a valid reason for us to count that as part of a person's net worth. So that's going to be backed out of the equation. Let's see here. I think there's one more slide I'm going to share here with you before I turn it over to Randy. So these women-owned small business program changes, they happened in July of last year and October of last year. Any federal solicitations issued after October 15th of 2020 have to follow the new rules for the Women-Owned Small Business Certification Program. So in other words, the COs issuing solicitations after October 15th must be checking for women-owned small businesses that have been certified by the SBA. Now, I should also, Randy has a great slide on this, and I didn't put it into this slideshow, but if you cast your mind to what a firm's DSBS profile looks like, Dynamic Small Business Search profile looks like, there's a section on SBA certifications. That's where you'll find, whether a firm is 8A certified or HubZone certified. That's been updated now to also show the Women-Owned Small Business Program, because that's now a formal SBA certification program. When you check a firm's profile for this certification, you will either see that they have a no checked off, that they are not Women-Owned Small Business certified or EDWOSB certified, or you may see that they are certified. You'll see a yes on that line. And then there's also a third line called pending. What pending means is that the firm has submitted the application in the SBA system for the formal Women-Owned Small Business certification, the new process. And their application has been screened and passed initial screening for completeness, which kind of gives everyone a little more confidence that, that firm is, has a possibility of being approved, right? So if you see a pending on there, pending firms are eligible to submit offers on a women-owned small business set-aside opportunity. However, the CO must check again just before award if that firm is in line for award to see if they've turned into certified. So not pending, but certified. If the CO does not yet see that firm as certified and the firm is still pending, there is a process where the CO can email directly to the Women-Owned Small Business Program office and have that firm's application expedited. So that application's already been initially screened, but there's still additional review that the SBA needs to do to complete review of that application. The CO emailing the Women-Owned Small Business Group will put that on a fast track so that the CO can hopefully make award to that firm, because technically the CO is not allowed to make an award to a pending firm, and certainly not to a firm who's not even pending. So there is a lot more information about this that we can provide. So do let SBA know, let us know if we can help you with that. And this slide also kind of mentions the fact that there are some class deviations that certain agencies have issued, because unfortunately these changes in the Women-Owned Small Business Program have not fully been put into the FAR yet. So what a lot of buyers and large primes are still seeing is the old language. But please know that in 13 CFR, I think is it 127, these changes have all taken place. And that's where one needs to go to find the current regulation on women-owned small business program. So, okay, I'm not sure. I was trying to watch the chat box, and I don't know if you'd like to run through the questions that are there on the portion I've presented, or if you want to wait till the end. I'm completely flexible, but this concludes the slides I was going to present today, and then I'll be turning it over to Randy next.
I think Randy, oops, Randy, I'm not hearing you. Would you be okay if we go ahead and do some questions with Yuri right now and then roll over to you next? Would that be acceptable? Oops, and Jeremy, we might need some help with Randy. I'm not hearing him. Are other people hearing him?
Hello, is that any better?
Oh, that's much better. Yes, yes, now you're here.
I'm sorry. I can answer these questions before we move on. I wanted to make a clarification anyway on one of the statements. So to confirm, self-certs for WASB are still fine for SR reporting, but certifications are for set-aside procurements from the government. Yes, that's accurate. So right now it's kind of a dual track system. Women-owned businesses should still continue to self-certify in SAM as women-owned. In the interim between when their SBA certification shows up on DSBS, for reporting purposes, for subcontracting, for getting credit for women-owned, if you award a full and open or a small business set-aside contract and the awardee is a women-owned business, you will still get credit for that WASB if they're still in SAM, but not necessarily updating DSBS yet. So for the purposes of the SBA certification and DSBS, it's for WASB set-asides and WASB sole sources. They have to be approved in DSBS to be awarded either a sole source, a WASB sole source, or a award under a set-aside. There's one little nuance that isn't reflected in a lot of the SBA training, and that's the third-party certification process. If a company is using a third-party certifier, that won't necessarily show up in pending in DSBS until it's completed and the application to SBA has been done, and then it shows up. So if you have an apparent awardee on a woman-owned small business set-aside or sole source for that matter, and they're not in DSBS, check with them first if they have a pending application with a third party. If they do, you're still good to go. SBA will request a third party to expedite their certification, and then they'll update their system. There was one on timeline. That's a hard target to pin down. SBA, you're correct me if I'm wrong, I think they have 60 days until they've accepted the package as complete. Might be 90, but that's not from when the package is submitted to them. That's when somebody has looked at it and say, we got everything we need, we're gonna start processing it, and it's within that window. There have been a lot of rejections of packages for various reasons. It's the program admittedly has been a little slow getting off the ground in that respect. So there is a timeline from when they have to be done, quote, but dependent on when the package is accepted as full. And SBA took this program on, but with no additional funding. So they're implementing this program with the same number of people that they had before. So they're doing well, but they do have there's been some struggles. Nice presentation, Yuri. Do you have information on FAR 2.101 thresholds? Yuri, you want to take a look that up while I'm doing my stuff, and see, it's just asked if we have information on the FAR 2.101 thresholds.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
And I'll put the answer into the chat.
Perfect. WASB, SBA certifications are only for the federal government, correct? They're still self-certified to us as large farm contractors. We choose to say yes, absolutely. So as a large prime contractor subcontracting to a woman-owned small business, depending on your business practice, you can accept their self-assertion that they are a small business. I have to go look it back up, but I think, I don't think you can even require that they're registered in SAM and that those certifications are there as a sub. That's a moving target right now with the credit for subcontracting's first tier and below right now. But yes, a company does not have to be in DSBS as a WASB to be a subcontractor and assert that they're a women-owned small business. Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Stephanie. Right, and Tony, thank you. Same thing. All right, so I've got about 15 minutes. My portion should go fairly fast. Please ask questions if you have questions. Again, we did this one earlier in the fall, so I'm not gonna, I mean, the spring, I'm not gonna beat this stuff up. So WASB, well, now let's go to HubZone. So HubZone, this is kind of old news. The firms are required to recertify annually now, but they're only examined by the SBA every 3 years. They don't have to certify HubZone at time of offer and award. They do at time of offer, and they're good for a year. So once they're certified, they're good on offers for the entire year. That's used to be that they had to be recertify at offer. Now, again, it's an annual certification or annual certification. The attempt to maintain, that's the employee. We understand there's differences when a company, a HubZone has a government contract and when they don't. So we understand that when they get a contract, sometimes they have to spin up employees and numbers go back and forth. The rule just is defined, the attempt to maintain is that they maintain at least 20% and continue to try and hire HubZone employees. The other one big one in change is that if a employee lives in a HubZone and has lived in that HubZone for at least 6 months and moves out, they still get to count that employee as a HubZone as long as they remain an employee. Part of that is SBA. The purpose for the HubZone program is to kind of give a step up, and a successful program, people start making money, they are more successful, and they want to move out of some of these areas. So that's kind of a big one. And this is more vendor centric than contracting officer anyway. Slide 18. HubZone governor designated areas. Again, this is high level, mostly SBA driven, where governors of states have been allowed to apply for HubZone status for certain depressed areas in the state that SBA has not designated as a HubZone. Key to this is the unemployment rate. So the unemployment has to be at least 120% of the state or US average, which is pretty hard to maintain or pretty hard to attain at times. That's the one pretty large roadblock that I've seen in the looking at what areas may be eligible for governor designated HubZones. The next slide, the HubZone maps have been frozen. That keeps getting pushed back because of delays in the census. So right now, it's the HubZone map is frozen until June 30 of 2023. So what is a HubZone right now will remain a HubZone through 2023. One of the changes that I think I briefed in the spring that has changed is the SBA had a rule that said that if you have a long-term lease or buy a building, that you will be still considered as a HubZone for 10 years. And they've backed off, and that's no longer the case. So if HubZones, or if there's companies that have heard of that rule, take a real hard look at it before depending on that, because it has changed. Let's see. Yeah, no, I think that's enough of that one. Size standards. The next several slides are about size standards. We're going to go through them really quickly. The main point I want to address here is that instead of large blocks of industries that are the same size standards, every NAICS code is going to have its own now. So instead of like a construction, special construction or vertical construction or whatever, having the same size standards, each NAICS code is going to be looked at and have its own standards. So pay attention. I'm sure all the contractors, contracting officers and buyers do look at NAICS codes and site standards, but anything you do often repetitively, make sure you're checking the site standards. A lot of them have increased. None of them have decreased, and there have been no industries that were considered small business that are not because of the new NAICS code site standards. So they reviewed 145 in these with the healthcare education codes and proposed increases to 70 of them. Next slide is professional, scientific, and technical service management, admin support, sectors 54, 55, and 56. Again, no proposed decreases. And there were a handful of increases. The addition of 2,600 small businesses under the increased size standards is the key on this slide. The next one is for agriculture and forestry, fishing and hunting, mining, quarrying, oil, gas extraction. Again, there's no proposed decreases on any of these. Would add that, key down there, 49,000, almost 50,000 small business, most of them agricultural sector. Transportation, warehousing, information, finance, sectors 48, 49, 51, 52, 53, would add 790 small businesses if and when it's adopted. So next slide, we're going to have her on for just a minute. So wholesale and retail trade. So why are we looking at wholesale and retail trade? Because we don't use them, right? That's just 42 and 44. These NAICS codes are not used in government contracting. So my question was, well, why are we even looking at them? But I want to make a comment on this. A lot of times it just says we don't use them, but why don't we use them? The reason that these NAICS codes are not used is because the NAICS codes, for the purposes of reporting, Congress wants to know what we're buying, not who we're buying from. There's other areas that we say we're buying, it's a small business, it's a large business, it's a hub zone, whatever. For reporting the NAICS codes, Congress wants to know that we're buying $100,000 worth of lumber, not that we're buying $100,000 worth of something from Lowe's. So that's the rationale behind the reason that we don't use the wholesale retail NAICS codes. Next slide. So surplus property for veteran-owned Puerto Rico and disaster-affected small business. This final rule allows veteran-owned businesses in Puerto Rico in those in declared disaster areas to buy surplus property from the U.S. government. DRMO, our old-time military folks know it as. GSA is running the program now, but it allows them, it doesn't give them the property, it allows them to buy surplus property from the government. Let's see. And I think that was the question on hub zone, I think, was adequately answered in the chat panel. LOS, all righty, finally. Limitation on subcontracting has finally been done. I'm waiting on this one for a long time. This was the second oldest, I think, of all of the FAR cases that were on the books. And so it finally came out. It hit the books yesterday, I think. The rule will be effective on the 10th of next month. The FAR clause is finally going to change to 1914. Will finally be updated to the correct language. So a couple key points, the change, the effective change is more in language than really a substantive change. So what the limitations on subcontracting says is that a contractor under a small business set-aside contract cannot pay more than 50% for supplies or services, 85% for construction, or 75% for specialty construction to another subcontractor that is not similarly situated. So that means on a small business set aside for goods or services, they either have to self-perform or subcontract not more than 50% out to another small business. If it is an 8A set aside, if it is a hub zone, socioeconomic set aside, veteran owned, rules apply. That has to go to a similarly situated company, at least half, right? So if it's a veteran owned, disabled, veteran owned small business set aside, they cannot subcontract more than 50% to a non-veteran owned small business, non-disabled veteran owned small business. So that's one of the key things. Non-manufacturer trumps this still. This is the one, I'll talk about that at the very end of the LOS discussion. Doesn't apply under SAT. Neither limitations of subcontracting or the non-manufacturer rules apply under SAT for a small business set aside. It's a little misleading. If it's a socioeconomic set aside, it does apply. So if you're doing a hub zone 8A, women-owned or service-disabled vet set aside, these limitations apply at all dollar amounts. So that one that for me as a contracting officer was a little bit confusing. Well, it doesn't apply under SAT. Well, yes, it does if you're doing a socioeconomic set aside. Waivers, I think everybody's probably familiar with the waiver process. Back to the non-manufacturer rule. Non-manufacturer rule still trumps LOS. That's the one case where limitations on subcontracting, if you have a socioeconomic set aside, i.e. a hub zone, and the hub zone business is supplying a product that they did not manufacture, it has to come from a small business manufacturer, not necessarily a similarly situated small business. And so that's one of the weird things. It's based on the underlying law. The non-manufacturer exists, and therefore it trumps the limitations on subcontracting. Oh, let's see, running pretty close on time. Let's go ahead. If there's any questions on the LOS, please let us know. Let's go ahead to the next one, Yuri. What did we miss? Yeah, okay. So scope of PCR review real quick in the interest of time. Basically, it's now codified. It says PCRs can look at anything they want. That's in a nutshell, that's what this new rule states. So oversat set aside, the PCR wants to look at it to determine whether there's an additional socioeconomic set aside that's possible. Then that's what this rule says. Next slide. I think this one, good faith in subcontracting, is probably pretty important. We want to hit that. The big thing in this rule, it's a fairly long final rule that came out. It gives examples, and there's a couple here, but there's several listed, at least 10 or 15 of examples of failures to make a good faith effort. It says if they do these things, if they've done these things, even though they didn't make their subcontracting goals, it can show that they made a good faith effort to make those goals. We'll revisit that if we want to in the questions. Keep going. Does NMR apply to SAT under FAR 13.5? Yes, it does. The doesn't matter, commercial thresholds, whatever, non-manufacturer rule applies over SAT.
And we have quite a few questions in the Q&A section as well. let's see, will new NAICS codes be published to reflect changes?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Will new NAICS codes be published to reflect changes?
I don't know of any new NAICS codes that are being contemplated. The size standards for the existing ones definitely will be. Yuri, have you ever heard anything about additional NAICS codes?
No, nothing about new. I'm wondering if the person asking is wondering about the increase in the thresholds, whether they will be published. And yes, they would be. They would show up in our table of size standards.
Right. Is a supplier or subcontractor? No.
And then can you confirm my understanding that large, other than small business prime contractors can still accept self-certifications? From women
Absolutely.
on small business? Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, here's another one. So a third-party certifier from WB ENC does not guarantee they are small? Question mark.
No, because it depends on NAICS code. And that goes with everything. They're a woman-owned small business under particular NAICS codes, but they may not be under other NAICS codes. So they're certifying women-owned, not necessarily under, well, they have a primary NAICS code and they would be women-owned under the primary NAICS code. But other than that, it depends. There may be a woman-owned business that is or isn't small, depending on size standards.
So kind of to summarize, clarify, if a client goes through a third-party certifier, they still have to go through the SBA process?
Yes, so the third party, but it's extremely expedited. So if you get your third party certification, you go into the SBA beta certify, you say I'm third party certified, you enter your certificate, you're done. And SBA, the process takes much less time than otherwise, because you're already certified. You are certified from the third party. So, and then the other thing that goes along with that, if you initially use a third party certifier, and 3 years down the road, it's time to recertify, and you don't want to use that third party certifier, you don't have to. You can recertify as a WASB, and you're recertified, so the process will be more streamlined. But just because you used a third party certifier once does not mean you need to continue to use them year after year after year. There is value in doing that, but you're not required to do it.
Looks like a couple more questions came in through the chat box as well. Will the current NAICS Blue Book be revised to reflect changes?
So the Blue Book, I wonder if, boy, that reminds me of a very old, like a physical hardbound Blue Book I used to use to look up the NAICS codes. And I don't think that will be updated because now we use the SBA size standard table. It's a lot easier to update than the actual book.
And is this saying if a prime is a day late on the ISR submittal, they are charged LDs? I'm wondering if that was a previous question.
So liquidated damages, the part of the, no, it doesn't, right? Liquidated damages are not automatically charged. There's always a determination of good faith effort. So no, if they're late in the reporting, it doesn't mean they're going to be charged liquidated damages. Liquidated damages are also defined in the latest final rule as the dollar amount is the dollar amount they missed their goals by. So if they missed their goals by $20, that's what their liquidated damages would be assessed if it was determined they did not make a good faith effort to make those goals. I'm scratching my head here. Eileen, do you want to expound on that a little bit? I hate it when that happens. It happens to me often. And I'm sorry, I ran through this stuff awful quick.
I'm sorry, I might have taken up too much time on you, Randy.
That's okay. You're so thorough, Yuri. It's awesome. That's fine. I mean, and feel free to email me or Yuri if you have any specific questions that you don't want to take up time here with. There's my email address. Yuri's is Yuri Dyson, YURI.DYSON @SBA.gov. Any questions that have arose out of this session? I know people are really sensitive about going over time, and we are over. So I would like to respect that, but I will stay as long as anybody wants me to.
Or maybe could we ask if you would still be on in about another hour and a little bit when we wrap up the next panel session. So we've got 2 more sessions. If you might be available after that for additional questions.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Definitely, I can.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, with that in mind, let's roll on over into our 12 o'clock session. That'll be at our 12:05 session. And this one is navigating the new system for award management.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Fine? Yes? Okay.
Thank you, Vanessa.
all
I'll
right,
let you
okay.
take it away.
All right,
Thank you
great.
very much.
Thank you, Kay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be presenting and I'm doing it from the perspective because of on the call we have, government agencies and large businesses. So we do a lot of training for small businesses when they're trying to register on the SAM system. So I'm not going through how to set up an account, how to set up your profile. I'm basically looking at it from the standpoint of a large business trying to do a search for small businesses. And so, okay, next slide, Jeremy. Okay, so as everybody knows, unless you're new to federal contracting and a new SBLO officer, this is what the previous SAM, the legacy SAM, looked like prior to May 24th, 2021. And now with the updated version, this is now what it looks like. So what they've done is they've integrated a lot of new systems. Now they've retired beta, so there is no longer any beta. Everything is now on sam.gov. The only thing still left on beta is the WOSB certification. So, everything that you'll want to find, wage determination, contracts, even your reporting for small businesses and wage determination and entity registrations are all now on sam.gov. Next slide, Jeremy. So today, what I'm doing is because we get this question a lot from both small businesses and large businesses, when they're trying to search in SAM, before the migration happened, it was easy to search for small businesses. You could narrow it down based on their socioeconomic status, based on their certifications, the region. But when everything merged together, it now became a little bit, I won't say difficult. It's just now it's more of a process of what you need to do. So, the first step that everybody does when you get onto the website, just as you did before, they select the domain that they want to search. They use the pull down menu, hit entity registrations. Next slide. So when they hit this, they get this screen. And on this screen, of course, like everybody, when I clicked on entity registrations, first thing I would do is, okay, I'm looking for construction companies. I would just type in the NAICS code 236220 and hit the little hourglass because I wanted to know, how many businesses were under construction. And if I wanted to get more detailed, of course, then I would just type in the word construction. But to narrow it down, I always use the NAICS code. So once you hit the button, next slide, Jeremy, this is what you would get. So what they've done now is that in order for you to conduct a search for any entity registrations, you now have to have a login. So you don't necessarily have to be a role, meaning that you don't have to update a SAM profile or be assigned a role by, your manager or the owner of the company. Anybody can sign up to have access to the system. So it's just a matter of you going in there, registering, your name, your email address, and everything that you would need to have the login. So, I guess the government wants to see who's searching, even though companies have checked the box stating that they want their public profile to be seen, publicly seen. So now, when you get this error, it's telling you that you have to create a login. Next slide. And I just kind of wanted just to briefly touch on creating a login for those who aren't familiar with creating a login, just because we do still have companies asking that aren't in federal contracting but are new to the system. So basically, it's you hit the sign in button for new entity registrations. Next slide. You create your SAM registration. So what you're doing is you're creating a new account. Next slide. You enter in the email address. Now I'll tell you, the email address that you enter in here is the one that's going to be connected to your profile. So if you don't have access to this email address, it can be a Yahoo, it could be a AOL, it could be a Gmail, it could be your work email, but just ensure that you have access to your email that you are entering into the system. Once you enter the email, you'll hit submit, and it automatically defaults to English, so you know. What will happen is it will send you an email, and it'll show you the email that they sent the notification to, so that some people, I never got an email. I said, well, did you look to see the email that you entered? Did it match? Was it correct? And sometimes they may have left the letter out or they mistyped it. So I said, well, I'm gonna have to go back in there and re-register. So that's a good indication as to you entered in the correct email. Next slide. So what you'll get is you'll get an email notification in your email box, and it'll be from login.gov. Next slide. So what you'll have to do is you'll click on the link. You'll have to confirm your email address. That is a way that they know that, yes, I do want to set up an account, and this is, this is me setting up the account. So it's requirement. If you don't confirm your email address, you can't go any further. Next slide. Once you confirm your email address, you then create your own password. Now, the password has to be at least 12 characters length, and it must be either good or strong. They always tell you don't use the company name, don't use your own name, but make it something, that would be memorable to you. Write it down, numbers, letters, special characters, but you'll see the bar at the bottom. It'll actually tell you what the strength is. If it says so, guess what? It's not strong enough. It has to be either good or great. And that's your indicator whether or not it's going to be accepted by the system. Next slide. So once you do that, then you select how you want to receive your second method of authentication. It's a two-system authentication method, and most of the time, companies will select by phone because it's the fastest and easiest, and you can either do it by a key or some other type of way to receive that second notification. Next slide. So I always select phone call or text message. So you'll enter in the phone number. Once you enter in the phone number and hit send code, it'll automatically send you a code. Next slide. So what you'll do is you'll get a code, and you'll have to enter the code into the system. Once you enter the code, you're going to hit submit. What I will tell, go ahead, Jeremy, next slide. What I will tell you is that a lot of people say it's cumbersome every time I log out and I have to log away in, then I have to use another code. If you're using the same browser, meaning that you opened this up in Firefox, you entered in your code, now you're like, okay, now I got to go do something else, and you log out or close out the window. If you open it up in the same browser that you previously used and you enter in your email address and your password, you won't have to do the second method of authentication. But if you open it up in a Google Chrome, you will have to do that. So, just something for those individuals that may have to go into the system multiple times within the day. Maybe you have to look something up in the morning, and then later in the afternoon, you have to go and look up another company, or you're searching for another company to see if they have an active profile. As long as you go into the same browser that you used that morning, you won't have to enter in that second method of authentication. So just, know that. I mean, it'll kind of save you time, but because I'm always in the system. So I'm always looking up either trying to view contracts or trying to look up to see if a business is active. And so that was one thing that I found, is that if I use the same browser, I didn't have to go in and I could just put in my email address, my password, and then it would just open right up. So when you get to the system, if you don't have any roles associated with your profile, this is what it'll look like. It'll just say, okay, you don't have any entity registrations, which is fine. That's what you want. And your next step would be to select the search button at the top, especially if you're trying to look for companies that are small businesses. Next slide. Okay, so this is, once you hit the search bar, this is where you can search for the business, what you can put in the keyword, what it is that you're actually looking for in the business, or what kind of business you're looking for. Next one. When you hit that search bar, it'll actually populate. There's a plus button that you will select. When you hit the plus button, it'll allow you to select entity registrations, because if you're in the search bar and you just type in 236220, what would happen is, because you didn't select what you were actually looking for, it's going to give you a list of contracts. It's going to give you a list of entity profiles. I mean, you're just going to get contract awards. So you're going to get a whole mixture of everything tied all together, just because you didn't select exactly what domain you were searching in. So when you select entity registrations, you're telling, computer or the system that you only want to see entity registrations. Next slide. Once you click that, then you'll be allowed to then go in, put in a keyword. I typed in the word construction. When I typed in the word construction, 236220 came up and populated right under in green. Then I went down to socioeconomic status, because I wanted to know, okay, I'm looking for a Native American business that is HubZone certified. So you'll click, first what you'll do is you'll click, Native American, or you can click, woman owned. If you want a minority owned company, you can pick, African American, Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander. It allows you all of the categories to select from. And then as you go further down, then you'll be able to see all of the 8A, HubZone, joint ventures, labor surplus. You can even see those that are, what do I want to say, large businesses. So you get to select what it is that you're actually searching for. And that's kind of how you narrow your search by. So as I selected those categories, you see on the right-hand side what a list of businesses that came up that matched the criteria that I was looking for. You can also enter in multiple other categories if you want to narrow your search. Next slide. When you take a look, because I had the previous slide, when I just picked Native American businesses and I looked for construction, a list of 2,113 companies came up. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of companies for me to try to search. And that was looking at it nationally. So what I said is, okay, I'm only looking for companies that fit this criteria that are in the state of Washington. So what I did is I picked the state. And when I selected the state, it narrowed it all the way down. And it then came up with a smaller total. So those are things that you, as a, somebody who's searching, want to select. And what I suggest is that if you want to change, you say, okay, now I don't want Native American, now I'm going to click it out. When I went through and just kind of did a test run, and then I went back through and I said, okay, I want to select now, I want to add 8A. So what I noticed that happened when I did that is that I got a combination of Native American businesses that were either hub zones or 8A, or a combination of both hub zone and 8A. So, I suggest that you go in and do a new search, on the criteria that you're looking for, because it's not a perfect system. And I still use DSBS because DSBS seems to work the best. I mean, it's one of the older systems, but when you select the different categories, it actually will populate only those companies that have those certifications. The other thing that the new system does not have is, and this is what Yuri and had mentioned, and Randy, I don't know if they mentioned it, but on the new system, when you select a company, it does not show you when they entered into the programs. So if they show, all it will show under their core data, under the social economic categories, is that they're hub zone certified, or they're service disabled, or they're woman-owned small business. That's what it'll show you. So that's why I would, suggest still going back to the DSBS if you're looking to know when they entered into the program, when they exited out of the program, or even if they're coming close to exiting out of the program, because that information still hasn't been placed into the new system. All it tells you is that they are, certified, or that they carry those certifications. So that's just one thing that I would, mention to you as you're searching, in the system. Next slide. The one thing that I like that wasn't available before, but now it is that you see the 3 dots to the right that says action. Well, these 3 little dots, that's where you can actually download a report, or you can save your searches. So if you're conducting a search, you're looking for a woman-owned company that's hub zone certified, that's Hispanic-owned, you can go in and say, and then looking for maybe in the state of California, you can go in and save the search. Maybe you don't want to download the information now, but you do want to save the search and label the search, as such, so that you can later come back and take a look at that. So once you hit the little 3 dots on the right, go ahead, next slide, Jeremy. It'll allow you to download a report, and it'll ask you, how do you want to save it, or do you want to download it? If you're searching, of course, you'll probably want to download the report, but you may not have the time right now. Instead of going back and reconducting the search, you may just want to save it. So what you'll want to do is you'll click on, download. Next slide. And when you click the download, this is what the window that you'll get. So it allows you to select one of 2 options. You can either select it as an Excel spreadsheet, or you can get it as a PDF. Now, a PDF, it's going to give you the company name and the information of what you see on the screen. But if you do an Excel spreadsheet, that actually allows you to sort the data. So my suggestion is using an Excel spreadsheet, because you can search it based on, maybe the NAICS code, or you can search it based on the county or the city of where that company is located. So once you click the Excel spreadsheet, next slide. This is what it'll give you. It'll give you a window where you can then say, yes, I want to download this Excel spreadsheet. Next slide. And this is what you'll get. You'll get an Excel spreadsheet with every category in each column. And I expanded some of the columns just so you could read them, but this is really good information. I mean, it wasn't available before, but now it is, I would sit and play around with it, but you can see it downloads all the information into a table. And from this table, what I did is I took a look at the top categories, did a custom search, which is at the top with the symbol. I know Jeremy would have to point to it, and I don't have a pointer, but you can sort it, based on the categories of the table. And you'll notice when you look at the NAICS codes, the NAICS codes aren't all 236220. So what they've done is it actually lists the primary NAICS code of that company, but the 236220 could be a secondary NAICS code that's listed in their profile. So, if you're only looking for companies that have the primary NAICS code 236220, then I would search it by NAICS codes. Next slide. And then here I did the same table, but what I did is I did a custom search and I searched it, I wanted it by cities. So what I did is I did a custom search and I put all the cities in alphabetical order so that I could see how many companies were in each one of these cities. You can break it out, like I said, you can break it out by zip code, you can break it out by county. So, I mean, that's why I said an Excel spreadsheet is basically, to me, a better method of conducting searches for your company. And then you can always go back and take a look at the information more in depth, but at least you have all of the information. And you'll also notice on the spreadsheet, it lists their UEI code. So now, as of April 2022, they'll be retiring DUNS numbers. So now businesses will have to remember their UEI code. It's actually now being used in grants.gov. So people who are applying for grants, now what it's doing, it's asking for your UEI code. And if you're already in the SAM system, you've been assigned one. After April 2022, it'll be assigned to you when you start your registration in SAM. So, we won't be calling, PTAX won't be calling Dun & Bradstreet to help small businesses set up their DUNS number. Hopefully we've been told that, we will have a way to communicate with the help desk at SAM that we can help businesses walk through the process. But, this is information that we help the small businesses to fill out, to complete. And that's why when we're working with them, we emphasize to them why it's so important for them to have this information. Why it's important for them to list their addresses. Make sure it's always correct. We have so many companies that have an address in SAM, but guess what? They are no longer located at that address. So, and just because they never went through the process of changing it. And, so we help them to try to understand why they have to change that information. Because when a large business is subcontracting work, this is the only thing that you have, besides them filling out your forms, and if you're trying to match information to what's in the system, it's not going to match. So, things like that is when you, as large businesses, government people, work with PTAX. I mean, we're a great resource to you. We're here to help make your life easier, but we're here to help the small businesses to really walk through this process to help them understand why it's so important for them to enter in correct information. Another question I get asked is there a certification for small businesses? There isn't. It's basically, as they mentioned, it's the honor code. So, I'm always telling the companies that I work with, please update your information in SAM. Don't leave it the same information as to when you first did your registration 10 years ago. I know your revenue is no longer $10,000. You need to update that information because it is important. Someday, maybe 10 years from now, 5 years from now, somebody will be going in there and validating, whether or not that is true. But, it's important that, that information is true and accurate. And, that is something that they attest to when they complete their registration. They're saying, yes, all this information that I've entered in is correct to the best of my knowledge. And so, we always emphasize that with the businesses. Next slide. Now, I left this slide in there just because for those that aren't familiar with the dynamic small business search, this is still one of the methods that I always use for businesses. And just because a lot of businesses that are new to federal contracting, they don't know that this part exists and why it's used by SBLOs or why it's used by contracting officers. It's basically to perform market research. That's how they're able to distinguish whether or not there are enough qualified women-owned businesses, enough qualified 8As, enough qualified hub zone. This is where you are able to, or where they're able to put in keywords, get down to the nitty-gritty of what it is that they do. So it's an important component, and it's important for you as small businesses. If you notice that one of your businesses that you're working with doesn't have a profile set up in here, and they should, that you let us know, because we can always work with that business to set that up, because it is an important part, and maybe they don't realize that how they can really use it for marketing. And so that's why I would just please keep emphasizing, use your PTACs, work with your PTACs. We're a great resource to you. Next slide. I think that's my last slide. So that's all I have. I know, went short and sweet, but if you have questions, like I said, all PTACs can answer questions for you. I don't know if there's any questions that anybody has. But the system is always changing. I'm always in the system, so there's always something new that I can always help. If you have issues with your getting into the system, or you're having issues with tickets, please contact us. We can help you. I'm always bugging the FSD second tier, telling them, you need to get this business, you've been working on this too long. I need this business registered. So yeah, definitely reach out to us, and we can also be an advocate for you as a large business, to help you. If you're trying to get somebody registered, they're not registered, or they're inactive, they don't know how to get active, definitely have them contact us, because we can help them work through that process, through a step-by-step process. And it's free. There's no cost for our services. So how many people can say that? We're free.
Vanessa, thank you so very much. You're just a wealth of knowledge. And for anyone who has not previously worked with a PTAC, truly, PTACs are the best thing there is, especially when you're trying to work in solicitations, procurement requirements, and meeting what the government needs. They are just a wonderful resource to work with. We've got a couple questions for you here. Let's see. What recommendations, advice do you have for when you are searching SAM and a company has an upcoming registration expiration date? Is there a way we can see if they have put in a new application, if their reps and certs are changing?
Yes. So before they changed the system, everybody was actually able to see that a company had submitted their registration, or it was still pending. But now we don't have privity to that information. So only the company has access to whether or not they submitted it, where it's been approved. But what you can do is you can pull up, when you're logged in, pull up their SAM profile, type in their DUNS number, do a search. Once you hit the company name, the entity name, it'll allow you on the left-hand side to either download their reps and certs, but it'll have the date as to the last time that it was updated. And if it still has a date from maybe 2 months ago, that means that it still hasn't become active. What you can do is contact your PTAC, because I get large businesses that will contact me and they say, hey, Vanessa, can you tell me whether or not they have submitted their registration? And the first thing that I'll do is I'll call Sam, tell them I'm a PTAC, I'm checking to see if this company with DUNS number, has submitted an update. And what they'll do is they'll say, oh, okay, yes, they did submit an update. It's still going through the process. And then what we do is we contact you back, say, yes, they did submit an update. It passed its first validation, IRS consent validation. Now it's been submitted to CAGE to be validated. And, once that becomes validated, hopefully within the next couple of days, it'll then have the new changes in the reps and certs. So yes, we can definitely help you with that.
Thank you. Another question. We are having struggles with procurement searches. We are finding that the pre-solicitations are listed as a different name than the solicitation. So if we are following the pre-solicitation, we don't get notice of the solicitation. Is there some reason why the government is changing the name from pre-solicitation to solicitation?
What I've asked a couple of contracting officers why they changed the name, and what they've told me, and that maybe there's government people on the line, what I've been told is that the scope of work has been changed. Either they've increased the scope of work or they've decreased the scope of work. And maybe, the title they had wasn't accurate to define what that scope of work was. So what I always do, and it should happen, if you put it on your watch list when you're logged in, you follow it, you type in the pre-solicitation and you hit on, when you're logged in, on the upper right-hand corner, follow, it should send you a notification that something's changed, whether or not they changed the name, but they've done some type of action to it, and you should receive a notification. But if you don't follow it, then you would not receive a notification.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Another question. How often is SAM.gov updated?
A company, you can update your SAM profile as many times as you want. It expires 365 days from the last date that you updated it. So I have a lot of my companies, they update it every 325 days after, before it expires, usually, 30 days to 60 days before it expires. But if they're going after a contract that they don't have a NAICS code listed on their profile, they'll go in and do an update. They have to conduct an update in order to add a NAICS code. So if they're doing any kind of change, to their profile, then that's when they'll do the update. So it expires 365 days from the last update.
Thank you. Kind of rolls into the next question. I am receiving regular SAM registration update reminders, but received one 180-day extension email. Is the extension email valid?
Yes, it is. And the reason why you received that, I actually thought, hey, this is not correct. I actually had about 5 of our companies, our clients, forwarded me the email. I contacted SAM, they said, yes, we are issuing an extension. And the reason why is because when the PPP, the EIDL, and the shuttered venue grant came out, it required those companies, restaurants, museums, galleries, anybody that was applying for those monies to be registered in SAM. So what happened was there was a huge influx in registrations that were being sent, or new registrations that were being submitted, that they couldn't keep up with that influx. So what was happening is that companies that were already in the system would go in and do an update. And then what would happen is they become inactive because they never got to their registration because of all the other registrations. So what they ended up doing is they ended up doing an extension, and it's only a one-time thing. So, after this, I'm being told that, yeah, it's not going to, this will be the last extension that they do. And plus the merge between expiring beta also came into play also. You're muted, Kay.
Oops, I better unmute. That'll make it easier, won't it?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I was having a great conversation with myself. Question, Vanessa, will you be sharing your slides?
Yes. All the slides will be on our website along with the recording. So everybody who has allowed us to share, post their slides will be posted on there, and that will be posted by next Monday. Okay, and then Jeremy can share the website in the chat with everybody. Okay.
Thank you. Another
All right.
question. Can we get Vanessa's email address?
Oh, okay. Yes, I can put my email address in there in the chat.
And then another question. Oh, we're just getting all kinds of questions here.
I know.
Let's see. Can you print a list of the entities you are following? And does the entity information automatically update to entities you are following?
Okay, so the question is, can they get a list of the entities that they're following?
Yes, they ask if they can print it. So I wonder if they mean print or save. a list
They
of
can save
entities.
it. They can save, yeah, you can print it and you can save it. Oh, sorry, I sent this to Yuri, my email address, sorry, everybody. But yes, you can, it does allow you to print, the information. So you can actually print a profile in SAM from a company. So once you pull it up and you view it, you can print it. And it actually comes out nicer than the way the old system did it.
Good improvements.
Yeah, and you can save that, once you hit print, you can just save it, print as a PDF. It's already a PDF, but you can just save it as a PDF in your files.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, does a company have to have a NAICS code on their SAM registration to bid on a government solicitation?
Good question. So in order for you to complete your profile, you do have to have a primary NAICS code listed, but this is what I've been told is that some agencies you don't have to, but I'll just tell you about 99% of the agencies require you to have that NAICS code listed in your SAM profile. So I wouldn't chance it as a small business. I would just list it in my profile so that there's no issues that come up when I submit my proposal.
Thank you very much. Okay, oh, here's a good one. I have a supplier whose SBLO left the company, and they are saying they can't get their info into ESRS to see their ISRs. So the new SBLO can't submit the now overdue ISRs. Is this true?
So so what you need to find out is who is your entity administrator for your SAM profile, because every SAM profile has an entity administrator. That entity administrator can allow other users to have limited access. So that's what you're going to need to find out, because that SBLO may have been the entity administrator, then you may not be able to view or submit your reports.
Okay. Looking through, I think most of the rest of these questions have been answered one way or another. If a question has not been answered, we will be going through these afterwards and we'll get an answer to you. So if there's something you ask and you're going, wait a minute. Oh, there's another note here from someone. The new SBLO needs to contact the ESRS help desk.
Yeah.
That would also be good.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's about wrapping up. I want to extend a huge heartfelt thank you to Vanessa and her team. This is the second or third time we've used the native PTAC, and their assistance with putting on this event is just phenomenal. Again, I cannot do enough shout outs for the PTACs and what a wonderful assistance they are to the small business program, both industry and government. So thank you so much, Vanessa.
Yes, thank you, Kay. And, like I said, I really, I definitely ditto what you said. All PTACs, they're great. We all work with one another. So we support one another in everything that we do. If we have an issue, we talk to each other and ask, oh, have you ran into this issue? So we're a close network.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Kay.
think it's about time for
Yes.
us to transition on over. We have a panel session. And this time we get to hear from a few different people. One is Mr. Michael Gilbert, who will be moderating the next session here. We have Ms. Liz Mudd, who is the director for the Army Corps of Engineers Small Business Program. We have Mr. David Walls, who is the Small Business Deputy for the Keyport Naval Base out in Kitsap. We have Ms. Jackie Hacker. She's an SBLO with HDR. We have Mr. Jeff Holmes, who is Small Business Program Manager for RQ Construction. And we have Thurston Britt, SBLO for Cubic Corporation. I want to thank each of you. And I think we might have one more person who's also moderating, but I'm not seeing their name on this sheet that
That
I've
would
got.
be Darren Emmy.
Okay, and Darren Emmy, there we go. I want to thank each of you, and Michael, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. And I just have to comment, it was pretty cool. As Kay was introducing everybody, their picture popped up. So it was perfect timing. But the purpose of this panel really is to get after small business participation plans and the vital role that they play in terms of submitting on projects and of course winning, and how they play the small business program plays within that. So we want to help grow small business by emphasizing the importance of small business participation plans and how they play a key role in projects being won, which actually creates a incentive for compliance and also promotes growth. So with that, I'll just start with quick introductions, and then we'll start diving into some questions. I did speak before for a moment, but I am the Director of Business Operations at Fairchild Air Force Base. I'm a part-time small business specialist here. I've been in procurement for 34 years now, and a member on and off of the regional council for about 15 years. I'm currently the vice chair. So Aaron, maybe you go next.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Aaron Emmy. I'm one of the procurement specialists at the PTAC. I too have got a pretty decently long stint in procurement, starting it's been about 20 years. And actually, I'm coming over from the private sector. I was in supplier diversity with Toyota for many, many years until Toyota moved to Plano, Texas. And so at that point, I elected to remain a Californian. And the PTAC at the time also had an opening, and Toyota had actually supported the PTAC prior. And so it was a no-brainer for me. I wanted to learn more about the public sector. And so today, here I am. Thanks.
Okay, yes, next up, Dave Walls.
Great, thanks, Mike. And thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is David Walls. I'm the Deputy for Small Business here at the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, Division Keyport. There's 2 undersea warfare centers within the NAVSEA Major Command. The other one is over in Newport, Rhode Island. And like I said, I'm in Keyport, Washington, right across from Seattle. And our primary focus is all things undersea. So, you know, we have a torpedo maintenance facility where we maintain torpedoes as well as the targets. We maintain 3 different ranges in Canada, one in our backyard here in the Puget Sound, and then one off the coast of Washington State, as well as the technical insertion hardware that goes on all the submarines. We also have an unmanned underwater vehicle squadron here at Keyport. So we are always expanding that technology, the undersea, unmanned undersea vehicles. My background, I'm a former Air Force guy. I did 21 years in the Air Force. I retired and with a business degree and went into acquisition. So I was in contracts for about 8 years. And during that time, I moonlighted as a alternate small business professional. When that position became open, I applied for it and got it. So I've been doing small business now for about 4 years. It's a great job. I love being able to help people and help not just the small businesses, but also large businesses find small businesses that can help you. And so I'm happy to be able to take part in this discussion. So anyway, good to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Now I'll introduce my esteemed colleague, Miss Elizabeth Mudd.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm the Associate Director for USACE, and so I think we have a bunch of our office participating today, which is so great to see the collaboration. I've been at USACE about a year. Similar to kind of David's background, I started in contracting. I actually worked for NAVFAC for about 7 years, and I also got into small business by being a part-time small business specialist in our field office, and realized that all the things I loved about contracting are actually all the things I love about being in small business. Went over to a fourth estate agency where I was their director for a couple years and got to really work see how facility clearances kind of tie into working with small businesses, which was pretty cool. And now I came over to USACE, which is an awesome organization, and excited to be able to talk to you guys today.
Thank you. And that would be all of our government panelists. Now let's hear from our industry panelists. And let's start with the esteemed Ms. Hacker, who is a significant contributor to all events that happen for the Northwest Regional Council.
You're muted.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I'm with HDR. I have been in the federal industry for about 35 years. My background includes I was Director of Procurement, Contract Administration, and I've been in the small business programs for about 25 years. And that's what I do full time that I've been doing for probably 15 years as full time. So I'm looking forward to this, and thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar.
Thank you, Jackie. Mr. Britt, if you could let us know some about yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. I welcome this opportunity to speak to the group to talk about participation plans. My name is Thurston Britt. I am the Small Business Liaison Officer, and I carry the title Supplier Diversity Officer for Cubic Corporation. Cubic is a little bit of a different type of company. Half of what we do is defense. Our customer is the DoD, but the other half is transportation. Our customers are Metropolitan Transportation Authority in New York, Chicago Transit Authority, MARTA, which is in Atlanta, Washington, DC, WMATA, other large transit agencies, and also across the world in Europe, Singapore, Sydney, Australia, New Zealand. And I work primarily with our US companies, our business units, where we support, as I said, various transit authorities in fare collection. That is what we do. We are the guy that makes it possible for you to walk onto a subway and use your phone to tap on and just pay on. Forget about money, forget about cards, use your cell phone. I've been in the supply chain world for about 35 years. I've been a manager of inventory management. I've done all the cycle counts and all that sort of thing, and shipping and receiving. I've been in purchasing, been a purchasing manager. I've been in contract, been a contracts manager. And the bulk of my career has been in the private sector. I have worked for Raytheon for a short period of time. Now I'm working for Cubic. So I'm looking forward to this. All of my time is devoted to supplier diversity, both for transportation and on the defense side. Thank you again.
Excellent, Thurston. Thank you. And last but certainly not least is Mr. Jeff Holmes, who's also a core member of the Regional Council. And we're so grateful every time we ask him to step up. Here he is.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to bring my little perspective from construction into this. I work for RQ Construction. We're a large general contractor. Our focus is all DoD. Matter of fact, at this point in time right now, no offense, USACE, but we have all of our contracts are with DAFAC in California, Washington State, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and now the most recent in Puerto Rico. So we have work in quite a few different regions in construction. And I've been working for RQ for 11 and a half years now. And I've been an SBLO or small business program manager for the last 6.5. Prior to that, I was an estimator at the company. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So let's just dive in right into these questions. And again, our emphasis is growing small business through the emphasis on small business participation plans and understanding best value and how to improve in terms of the government and or the contractor. So let's start with the government. And so the government will take turns answering the questions. And then after that, certainly our industry panelists can also definitely weigh in. So the first question is, what recommendation would you make to contractors and government to improve the quality of government evaluation and or development of the RFP responses? So let's start with you, Mr. Dave Waltz.
Great, thanks. That's a great question. So first of all, you know, at Keyport, we do a lot of our acquisitions that are full and open will have that small business factor, and it's going to be a separate small business factor. We don't use it as a sub factor in technical or past performance. It's a separate factor in itself. And you know, we use really the same verbiage that is in the DFARS 215 and that PGI. So that's going to be our factor language. We also put in some you know, some you know, how you could determine the percentages. So I will say the small business commitment document, we go by the percentage for total contract value, where that's a little bit different than your subcontracting plan, which is subcontracted value. However, we do ask that they complement one another. And what I mean by that is, you know, we're going to look at how much money you're going to be subcontracting. So we'll be able to determine that. So with that being said, you know, to answer the question, my recommendation is to read that evaluation factor, understand what we're asking in section L, understand how we're going to evaluate it in section M, look at those attachments that we're going to provide to you, because we provide that the commitment document, and then ask questions. If you have any questions based on anything that we provide, make sure you're asking those questions, because we want you to provide you know, a quality document to us for us to be able to evaluate. There's a lot of times when we get things back that, you know, they're not filling out everything, and a lot of the times we're not going to go back out for discussion. So we are going to make an award based on that first proposal submission. So again, make sure that you are asking questions if there's something that's unclear when you're submitting that document. So that's probably my best recommendation.
Hey, thank you very much, Dave. Do you have additional thoughts to add, Ms. Mudd?
Yeah, and I think I can definitely echo for us. I think Dave did a great overview of that, and it's definitely very true for us as well, that you can expect to see that as a separate factor on all our full and opens, and kind of key things to look out for. And just a couple items to kind of tag on to what he was saying. So like when you see, maybe I'll tackle like the government side first. So kind of like I think some recommendations for us. We've made this internally in USACE a hot topic in our small business program this year to see, we want this to be the most value add in the evaluation factors that possibly can be. So we're kind of looking at how can we bring consistency across the board with it, and make sure that we can kind of use our critical thinking skills, but have baselines so you can see consistency from an organization from us. So a couple key factors for us is having all of our small business professionals be the ones that are actually reviewing and being on those evaluation teams. Because kind of similar to technical, you want the experts that understand everything. So kind of rest assured from the industry standpoint that that's who we have on our panels for this. Everyone who knows the most about it, that's able to kind of articulate it. But some things that we're really focusing a lot on is like ensuring those percentages, those minimum quantitative requirements, that those are based on market research, that when we're developing those, we're utilizing all of the tools in our toolbox of market research. So whether that be looking at ESRS and kind of seeing if this is a repetitive requirement or we've done like buys, let's look at the actual subcontracting dollars that turned out at those and use those to kind of drive our percentages or see how we can make assumptions from that. Also, when we're looking at those, like make sure we're asking the right RFI questions in the front. So when you see that RFP, you know that what you're responding to is reasonable, it's attainable, because a lot of what our group has talked about is there really has to be a balanced approach. So if we're driving minimum percentages to you, that might change the teams that everybody is making. And we want to make sure in some circumstances, does that affect the price or does that affect the end product we're going to get? So kind of making sure that we keep that balanced approach when we come up with percentages, so the government's getting the best value overall. But a couple things that I also just wanted to mention. I love the answer the mail that Dave mentioned, and I think that that's really critical. And also when you look at, so like we use adjectival ratings a lot, and that's going to help let you know where to spend most of your time. So if it's pass or fail, you can't really be given extra credit for going above and beyond. So you're probably not going to spend as much time. But if it's adjectival ratings, definitely make sure that you're going above and beyond on those, because you can receive credit for it in the factor. But just the one other point, at least I think that's true for USACE, is that there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to this factor. We can be looking at 6 or 7 different items within it. So don't assume that what you've used for one district is going to, answer the mail for another one. So I think definitely make sure that you're reading all the solicitations, and, we're giving you the answers in L and M. So just make sure that you're looking at those.
Yes, excellent. Always terrific advice to comply with L. Dave, did you have any alibis before we move over to industry comment?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Elizabeth brought up the adjective ratings. We do point out strengths and weaknesses. And, one strength is we always give a strength whenever you start pointing out, hey, we're going to be using this small business and this is how we're going to use that small business. And if you can tie that small business into a PWS paragraph, that's going to give you a strength. So anyway, I appreciated just the fact that she talked about the adjective ratings, and you probably saw me nodding my head a lot of times because I was agreeing with a lot of the things that she was saying. So anyway, that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Right, you bet. At this point, I'll move the discussion points. If industry would like to provide comment, no need to go one at a time. Just open up your mics and take turns. When you think you're done, I'll jump in so we can move to question 2.
Well, I'll say this from an industry perspective from Cubic. Whenever we do get that final RFP that we want to look at, and they're requesting a participation plan, one of the things that I try to do, and I work with our material estimating group as closely as I can, and our engineering, and we say, okay, this is the material we're going to use. These are the suppliers that we have vetted, looked at multiple times, and maybe even used on past programs. And then I'll put together basically a spreadsheet saying, okay, these are our costs based off of subcontract value and then total contract value. And I keep stressing to the group, I say, okay, guys, we got to make sure this thing is in sync. We cannot give them where it says one thing on the individual subcontracting plan, it says something totally different on the participation plan. They've got to match. They got to be like a hand in a glove. And of course, I start getting rolling eyes and all that sort of thing. But I know it's important because too many times we'll start getting questions after we submit our proposal. Okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? So I keep telling them, I said, we have to avoid that. We don't want to have our customer coming back. We don't want the Navy, the Air Force saying, why did you do this? You know, this doesn't make sense, that sort of thing. So I really try to emphasize making sure both documents are in sync with one another. And we try to beat the numbers as best we can, but at the same time, be conservative so we don't put ourselves in a bind.
So I may be naive in even suggesting this, but our participation plan and subcontracting plan are almost identical, except the subcontracting plan has all the FAR clauses that need to be. My question would be, is it possible at some point that we don't duplicate that and it could be combined and used for assessing the award, like whether or not to award the contract to us or to evaluate? Because it seems like just an incredible lot of duplication. Because in our case, the same information is put on both. The percentages just look different because of how it's calculated. Otherwise, they mirror each other. They're identical in most aspects other than the FAR statements.
If I may, I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe before somebody else weighs in or responds from industry, maybe Dave, I see your microphone's off. Do you maybe want to address what Jeff just said, or Liz, if he's not open?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that he's making. But you know, there are some differences. If you ever go to a DAU class, Defense Acquisition University, and they talk about these subcontracting plans and participation plans, they call them kissing cousins. You know, because there are a lot of similarities to them, but the difference is your subcontracting plan really is going to say, hey, we are going to meet these FAR requirements, and you have to have those elements, as you probably already know, Jeff. Where the participation plan is really going to outline, hey, this is how we're going to be doing it for this solicitation. We look at that, it's a factor because we're going to be looking at that and evaluating that, you know, to make sure, like, because we're looking for a narrative. The narrative isn't necessarily in that subcontracting plan. So we're looking at that narrative. Hey, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to use these companies. These are the companies we're going to list. This is how much money we're going to give to them, or we're going to use in this contract. This is the percentage. So there are some differences. I know there's some similarities, but we're using that participation plan for our evaluation, where the you know, the subcontracting plan is more assessed to make sure that it's meeting all the requirements in the FAR. So Elizabeth, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to help clarify.
I'm head nodding with you. Yeah, you know, I think I understand the thought process, and, you know, are we getting a lot of the same information from it? I think from the subcontracting plan standpoint, that's really responsiveness. So we could, or just in my experience, I have had instances as a prior KO where in responsiveness, we might come back to you for a clarification if there isn't something on there, and we can still award to you without opening discussions. Whereas if something is on that plan, that's not going to be the case. And the one worm I don't want to open, because I know across the board there's some differences in interpretations of the CFR, but in most cases, we also have to be considerate if small businesses are also going after this as a prime effort, and they wouldn't be required to have a subcontracting plan in that instance, and they do still need to respond against something else. But, you know, probably to the point that you're really getting at, could we have one format and use it for both purposes? And I think, I don't know if we'll get into the discussion, but I think when we talk about post-award compliance with it, I definitely think ESRS, we talk about that a lot at USACE, like just using ESRS as one mechanism so you wouldn't have to report separately.
If I could piggyback off of what Dave and Elizabeth were saying, one of the things I always look at when I'm reading through sections L and M, and it's a lot, I won't say every single proposal we look at, but I'll say the majority of them, they will talk about how the participation plan will be strictly used as an evaluation tool, period. But the plan will become part of the contract. And one of the things we do is that we have a master subcontracting plan that's drafted every 3 years. It's updated, and sometimes it gets updated throughout that 3-year period. So when I write that individual plan, it's geared toward that particular program only. And of course, and in the case where there is no participation plan, then the individual plan gets submitted along with the master. So when we do our participation plan, yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but at the same time, I still got that idea. I've still got that, fact in the back of my mind. Okay, they're going to look at this and they're going to evaluate it. This could either make us or break us. So I would rather put as much energy as I need to make that participation plan right and give that narrative, I think, as Dave had put it, so it would tell a good story. And then let the individual plan, obviously, yes, be in sync, but let it just follow along and support what's going on in that participation plan.
As in the AE world, I agree with the participation plans. The different clients, they ask for different types of narratives. Yeah. Some of them want them to know what our commitments are. They may want to know, they'll ask you, how are you going to meet these goals? There's a lot of different things that, as you said, that would give us maybe that wow factor of what we do within our company to give our client that warm and fuzzy that we're going to actually execute that plan and, walk the talk, if you will, because we're talking about that with the participation plan. And that is the one time that they're actually going to look at it. The subcontracting plan, having the 15 elements, is just to check the box. Yeah. Look at our calculations, make sure that it's a seamless transition with the dollars, and that's about it. But I think agreed. And many times they use the small business participation plan as the tiebreaker factor for large primes as well. So, Jeff, I agree. It would be great to have a little bit less of paperwork, but I think when we're going after that proposal, we do want an opportunity to maybe highlight something that we're doing above and beyond, or what we can do so that we're evaluated above our competitors.
Thank you, Jackie. That's been absolutely excellent dialogue going back and forth on this issue. But we have several other questions, and I want to transition this over to Aaron if he wants to lead us into the second question, please.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Okay, this next question, I think some of you have actually already touched on it, but it has to do, of course, with selecting who you're going to put on the participation plan. So the question is 2 parts. How do you decide who to list on a participation plan when it is submitted prior to the small business subcontracting plan? And then 2, who do you list when you have more than one vendor for the same scope and don't have a decision when the participation plan is submitted?
I'll step up first. For A&E, we actually do market search and look for our small business partners during the pursuit. Obviously, we have designs, situations that in most of our contracts, we are not able to bring on an additional subcontractors once we've been awarded the contract. So we're looking very seriously way early before the solicitation comes out to find our small business partners. Obviously, on my end, I am always involved in every federal pursuit. One of the things is that we're going to have a small business member that meets every single category. But we interview them, we go through their quals. What are we looking at? Because we've already kind of decided what we're going to do in subcontracting. We review that again after the solicitation comes out. Then we put that team together And that is what is going to go into the participation plan. That is who we're going to use after we're awarded, and we will not use any other small business partners unless there's something different in the scope that our partners don't provide, and or if we would have to then get approval from the contracting officer. Now, also asking about two companies that do the same thing. There are many times in a very large contracts that we may have, for example, simplicity, two cost estimators. But because of the size of the contract, the different things that we're doing, we're very also thinking of our small businesses and how much that they can actually handle during that period of performance. I mean, we've got a 5-year, $30 million contract. It just depends on also understanding and working with our partners that we know well. So we may have a couple that are going to do that, but they're still part of that team. We're watching them, making sure that they are being utilized during the execution of the contract, and they're, a part of that socioeconomic procurement planning.
Great, great. Mr. Holmes, you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, so this is a tough one for us in construction, to be honest with you. The portion that Jackie's talking about with A&E, we do have an element of that in some sense because we have our own design firm in-house. And so when we decide to go after a project or a bid, we bring on our engineering firms and our firms that are going to augment what we cannot provide for this contract. Those are easy people for me to list because they're signed up prior. They're signed up and we have contracts with them prior to the bid. That's not the case with subcontracting. I would say at least 95% of the pursuits we go after are design build. So our scope of work is not very clear. And when people bid, there's a good chance that what they bid is not the same thing that's going to be designed. So it's really tough for us to identify a sub that we can say we're going to utilize this person in the construction aspect of, once the award has happened. But I do say we do have a plan and we do have a way that we give it our best guess. And that is most of the regions that we work in, we have a lot of history. We have a vast database of small businesses that constantly do great work for us and come in competitive. And so I'm watching our software that's monitoring the bid invite constantly as we get closer and closer to bid day. And about a week out, because we got to get this thing printed, in most cases, our proposals are still printed and has to be shipped prior to the bid, by a couple days. We are checking to see who is saying they're going to respond, because no one in their right mind in construction turns in their bid prior to bid day. And I can tell you that it goes way back. It's because contractors are not trusted. They don't want to give you your bid, and then their bid shows up out on the street and somebody else uses it to shop the price. So we don't even know who's going to show up to bid until we actually receive the bid. A lot of times people tell us they're going to bid and then they don't. So again, it's a tough thing. I don't think that the value of evaluating it for construction and design build construction is great, because we have incomplete data. We do not have the answers we need to know to put a name down on a piece of paper. And you can't go, and I've heard this before. I said, well, you should go and negotiate with them prior to that. It's not the way it works. It's competitive and it's very, very tight margins. And we're talking, sometimes the decision isn't made of whose number to carry till like 10 minutes prior to the bid close. So for us, it's a matter of timing. I don't disagree with the process, the concept. I love it. I think it's awesome. And I think that as an ethical contractor, we could be trusted that we are going to make small business a huge part of everything that we do. For me, I think we need a lag, 24 hours at least after bid time. And we could submit a participation plan and a subcontracting plan that everybody could live with, and it would be very accurate. So. And by the way, almost always, we have to turn in the subcontracting plan and the participation plan at the same time. They go in with the bid. It's very rare that we don't that the subcontracting plan comes in later. And it really doesn't matter to me because they have to match. So it's not going to change, after the effect. Once I turn in the participation plan, subcontracting plan has to match it. So.
Great. Thank you. On to my fellow supplier diversity colleague, Mr. Britt.
I guess I just echo exactly what Jeff has said. We submit ours in together jointly. I can't remember a time where we submitted the individual plan and then we were given the option to submit a participation. I think every single time we've had to submit both plans together at the same time. But basically, it's just a matter of making sure that the data is correct and that everything is in sync. Now, fortunately, we are an engineering firm. We engineer everything that we do. What we look for in small businesses is a piece of technology that will augment what we have designed. And that's what we go after. That's what our engineers are constantly looking for. That small business firm out there that has developed a new process, a new technique that will augment what we have designed and make what we put together even better. And we'll bring that on board and we'll bring them into the fold. And then we'll make that right there creates a teaming agreement that we will list on that participation plan and that we will end up submitting to the government as our proposal.
Great. Well, I think that wraps it up. Want to go on to the next question, Mike?
Yes, absolutely. As we move on to question 3, we're starting to approach 1:30. So I'll just ask you to try to limit your answer to under 2 minutes. The next question is, how can we further grow small business through the use of the small business participation plan? And we'll start with the government. You just take turns and then go straight to industry. Thank you.
I can start it.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Elizabeth.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll start us out and then you can bring the heavy hitter in with it. Okay, I'm going to start with the prime, the canned answer that we'll build off of. So of course, when we're looking at these, the whole goal of this is to help from a subcontracting level, but also from a prime contracting level to make sure that, this is one area where you can give a small business credit for coming as a prime. And so that is one thing we're starting to look at USACE. So we pulled some data and we're finding that 44% of the time when we're doing full and open, small businesses are winning. So that's going to be one method that we're knowing, and not saying that's directly related to this factor, but I think when we look into subcontracting and growth that provides through this, and then we start to see them really show up not only in small business set-asides, but in prime contracting opportunities that are full and open, I think that lets us know that we're on the right track. But one other area that I think we have to look at is the more we use this, the more data we're going to have available. And then I think that's going to make it more meaningful in the future. It's going to help us have, better percentages, be more open. I found that last question, the discussions, just awesome to hear all the feedback on that and to really have us think through when we're developing this, kind of keep all of these things in mind so we can make sure in subcontracting and prime contracting that we're really providing as much opportunity as possible.
Yeah, and I echo what Elizabeth was just stating. And another thought that came to mind is, when you're doing your proposals, having, strong teaming arrangements with those small businesses, giving them meaningful work. A lot of times when we get our proposals, we'll see a lot of companies that are saying, well, these guys are just going to be suppliers or whatever. But when you can attach a small business with a portion of that PWS, that weighs very heavy. I'm looking to the side because I have another computer over here. So the factor, we say, it's going to include, and this is what we include, the extent of a commitment, such as enforceable commitments, and those are weighed more heavy. So that's why having that teaming arrangement with a small business is so important. And that teaming arrangement, usually there's a big chunk of that statement of work tied to it. Another thing that's not listed in the PGI, but it's talked about. I'm sorry. That's talked about is the including some of those companies that have done cyber work. So if you can find like a cyber contractor that's getting ready to transition over, that you're going to be able to get weighed heavily on that as well. So those are just a couple of other areas, to piggyback what Elizabeth was saying, that you can help those small businesses and have a stronger proposal. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Now let's hear from industry on this.
Well, I'll go. I think importantly, when we have them on the participation plan, just like you said, we are going to have a commitment. We normally have teaming agreements with our partners. So we're committing to them as much as they're committing to us. And as we look at building these, we bring on those small businesses. They are a partner and we don't want them to fail. And so it's important that, we're kind of looking at the same thing as it's long-term relationships. And when we're giving them that opportunity to work on our projects, we're working together. They have access to all of our smart people on the project. Sometimes there's a little bit of on-the-job training. So if you look at that in the big picture, they're growing and they're getting, building their revenue. They're getting some help from us, learning a lot of things as well as they go along. We can support them, turn around and support them maybe on a small business set aside as a sub to them. So to me, when I look at that, it's, we're generating obviously to have the small business participate on our contracts, but we're also looking important to, I know for HDR is when we're putting them on, these are companies that we value and we want to look at as long-term partners. And we want them to be successful so we can all be successful at the end of the job. So it kind of, to me, okay, so it's probably my fairy tale, but just the looking at what we do, that is in mind all the time. How are we growing our small businesses? Are we, when we're doing that outreach, as SBLOs, are we communicating? When we do the proposals, are we getting that work? Are we making sure they're executing that and taking care of those small businesses? So in the long term, it should look that we're growing those. And as Elizabeth said, we're going to bring you along some new prime contractors before long.
Thank you, Jackie. Anybody want to add anything else?
I'll say one thing. Our greatest challenge is IDIQs. Whenever we see one of those, and especially in a situation to where we don't know what exactly they want, and they still want a plan, and obviously the first question everybody asks, what are we planning to? So that's our greatest challenge, but some kind of way we still manage to get through the plan. But then when we get that first task order and then they come back and says, we want another plan, I said, okay, that means we're going to revise and can the old one and come out with a new one or whatever. And then on top of that, they'll ask for a participation plan. So I said, well, at least now we know what they want, and now we can put something together that's real. But usually that IDIQ, that for that contract level, that's always somewhat of a little bit of a headache when it first comes out.
Terrific feedback. Thank you. Jeff, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm good. I think they answered pretty good. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. It's really terrific to hear the passion for small business from both government and industry, and always very interesting to hear the the different perspectives. It helps us all, I think, to overall find ways to explore growing small business. So with that, thank you, panelists, and I'll push this back over to you, Kay.
Hi there. Okay. Wow, that time sure went fast, didn't it? I'm almost wondering if we maybe through a show of hands, or maybe we should check with panelists if they could go on for one more question, because this is really an awesome panel, and I kind of hate to lose the expertise that we've got with us right now. So would the panelists be willing to do one more question?
Sure.
Okay.
All right,
then
Aaron, take it away.
There
Okay.
you go. Thank you.
Question is, how is the small business participation plan utilized in developing your SBSP? How is it evaluated?
Is that for anybody? Who are you asking for?
Jackie, you're always starting, so let's start with you again.
Well, I think we've actually covered that one, but the small business utilization plan for us that's the beginning. And it's transitioned into that subcontracting plan. So I think really the participation plan becomes really the primary when we're in our pursuit. That's going to be our primary plan and what we're going to do on our small business. When it comes to that, we talked about that too, I think earlier about the evaluation. The government's going to evaluate us. So once we talk about, the team talks about what we're going to do, the proposal team, and we're talking about our small businesses and how we're going to execute that. And to me, that's our procurement planning moment initially. And so that's where we're going to put everything we can, and then the government's going to evaluate that.
Great. Mr. Holmes, you want to jump in?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that the template for the participation plan that we're seeing coming out of NAVFAC is a skeleton of what it used to be. So they're only asking for a breakdown of the scopes of work, the dollar amount of each of those scopes, the DUNS number of the companies, whoever we are listing, and they only provide a spot for a narrative if you can't hit the 20% minimum goal. So they don't want a lot of content or narrative on our participation plan. So really everything that's in our participation plan is also included in the subcontracting plan. There's nothing in the participation plan that isn't on the subcontracting plan for us. So they're kind of like one and the same for us.
Great. And finally, Mr. Britt.
For us, it's a little bit different. Our participation plan, for all intents and purposes, is a very detailed spreadsheet. We're going to show you who the supplier is. We're going to give you your DUNS number, cage code. We're going to tell you what their classification is. We're going to give you a very brief narrative of what their scope of work will be, and then what the dollar value is and how that calculates against total contract value. And then so far as a narrative, that will be reserved for elsewhere within the proposal itself. 99% of the time that participation plan falls in behind the individual subcontracting plan. And there it will talk about a little bit, talks about how we meet the FAR and meet all the 15 requirements, 52 to 19. But our participation plan is, as I said, is a very basic, but with a lot of detail spreadsheet. And we spend a lot of time with it because we search for as many small businesses that covers at least 2 or 3 or 4 different classifications at once that we can populate that participation plan with.
Great. I don't know if we have, how are we doing on time? Do you want okay, are we okay, or do you want to keep going?
Personally, I think, gosh, we wouldn't start you guys for about 10 or 15 minutes late, so it only seems fair to let those that can stay a little longer stay. We've lost probably about 30 people, but I anticipate that was because, you know, that was their end of day. So if the panelists are good for one more round, then let's do a thumbs up. And if not, then a thumbs down. And
Is there
okay,
questions? Kay, are there questions from the attendees?
let me look here.
Just real quick, I hate to do this, but I do have to run. I've got a training I got to run here at 2 o'clock. So I want to say thank you to everybody. It was really fun being a part of this, and I look forward to seeing you all in person again someday. So thanks.
Bye, Jeff.
And Jeff, before you
Take care,
completely
Jeff.
shut off, let me
Yep.
share something that came in for you.
Okay.
Jeff is speaking my language here. I say this repeatedly. It's taking the same info and manipulating it to allow proposal evaluations.
Mhm.
So you've got
Thanks,
a fan
Kate.
out there.
Well, thanks, Kay. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Take care.
Mhm.
Thank you.
It looks like we do have one other question from the audience. It says, forgive me if this was already addressed. There are instances where a participation plan requires you to list small businesses utilized or major subcontractors. In some cases, it's based on a bill of materials, so the list is massive. What is the real requirement asking? So maybe government, you want to try to respond to that? A volunteer?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, when you're putting your proposal together, I would, you know, again, you guys are going to propose how you guys want to propose, and we're just going to evaluate that. So you definitely want to make sure you're putting in your proposal those companies that you're going to be working with to help you know, you to attain those goals that you're putting in there, because you're going to be putting in not only small business but also some socioeconomic goals. So if you're going to put, if it's a bill of materials and you have a million engineering firms that you might be working with, I would definitely make sure you're using those firms that are going to help you meet those goals. Because when we're doing our evaluation, that's all going to take part of it. But then in post award, when we're starting to do our ISR evaluations and you're missing your marks, we go back to that participation plan. And we look at saying, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're getting there. Here's our list of companies. And we might ask those questions, you know, based off of what you propose. Like, hey, you said this, you're not doing this, please explain. So I would definitely put your best foot forward and your best guess forward, because a lot of things happen. Maybe companies go out of business or small businesses become large. So we know there's things like that happen. So I would definitely just, you know, put your best foot forward in that proposal. So Elizabeth, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I think that was great. Like, this is your time to tell us your story, like make those connections. Like, I think Mr. Britt was talking earlier, like they use small businesses to be innovative. Well, like if you're not telling us that anywhere, we're not going to know that. And that might be, again, like this is an area we can give you credit. The subcontracting plan, so it's like a check, you know, check the box, you got it or you didn't. So, you know, take the time to tell your story to us, and always remember, like, write it like the person that's reading it doesn't know anything about it. And I think that that's how you'll see the best value come out of it, that you might have 15 suppliers and maybe it's because it's an IDIQ and you're using them in different states, you know, but just articulate that. And I think that, you know, you'll see the right outcome.
Terrific, thank you. And maybe in concluding, we can go around and just answer this following question. What recommendation would you make to contractors, government, to improve the quality of their submissions or the RFP requirements? So you can think about maybe what's the Q&A from the session even in responding. So no pressure, but we'll start with you, Dave.
Well, thanks. And I kind of answered my final comment thought because I did write it down. But, you know, really, you know, when you're putting your proposal together, just make sure, you know, you're putting together a proposal that is going to be attainable when contract gets executed. Because when we're evaluating that small business commitment document, that is part of an overall best value. And so put together your best value. And I know there's IDIQs, and sometimes those are very difficult because we might not be asking in that IDIQ proposal for an example, which sometimes you see that, sometimes you don't. So that makes it really difficult for you. So putting that best foot forward is helpful. And like I said in my last response, you know, we do take those our small business commitment documents, and we say in our proposals that's going to become part of that contract, those numbers and those companies that you're listing. That's going to be part of the contract along with the subcontracting plan. So when we're doing those ISRs and we're seeing that, hey, maybe they're not meeting these goals, we can go back to those and say, hey, these are who they mentioned. Here's what they said they were going to, these are the percentages and the dollar values they were going to make. So we're going to come back and ask those questions. So that's why I say put the best foot forward. So, and again, always ask questions during that proposal time so we can help you with that. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Dave. How about you, Miss Mudd?
I think Dave had the wisest words. And I think everything we've talked through, you know, are really good points. And one point we kind of didn't touch on a lot that I'll just leave in there that I think Dave was just alluding to is that when this does become a part of the contract, you can be held accountable for it in different ways, and you can be held accountable for a subcontracting plan. So kind of just keep that, you know, in mind that they work together, but there are definitely other ways to, you know, that they're going to be looking at compliance post award in those, and just kind of remembering that it doesn't go away after the evaluation factor. But I appreciate everything that I think Dave kind of touched on, all the high points. So thank you much for having me today. This is.
You bet. Thank you. Jackie, how about from you?
I'm going to say definitely answer the mail. Really look at every point that they have in the solicitation, because sometimes that's not necessarily transferred over to the participation plan, but it says it in the solicitation. So you want to read that first. And, you know, if they're not asking for more, then don't feel guilty for not giving it to them unless you need to, but they're going to tell you what they want to see. One thing I would give to the SBLOs is if you are struggling on looking at this participation plan and how you're really going to say to do it, I recommend talk to your proposal team. As they're looking at the scope and how they're going to execute this contract, find out from them, well, what's the challenge? What can we do to help? How can we make this work? Because, you know, we're not it doesn't hurt to ask those questions, and they're the smart people that are going to be running that project. So I utilize our engineers, architects all the time, and I'm questioning them. How are we going to do this? And then you can fill that out and tell your client. So that's my tip of the day.
Excellent, Jackie. Thank you. Thurston.
I guess in our world, our participation plans, I guess one thing I would love to see is sometimes we'll get a proposal where they will give us a template to use for the plan. Sometimes they just said, we want a participation plan. They'll leave it at that. No template, no guide or anything. So then basically, people look at me and say, okay, what do we put in there? What's the column headings? And so basically you kind of go back to the basic format: name of the supplier, classification, cage code, DUNS number, description of what they're doing, dollar value, so on and so forth, and leave it at that. But I would love to see some sort of a standard where, you know, the participation plan is X, Y, Z, and that's what it is. And it's that way every single time. I mean, it's clear cut on what they want in the ISP. I would love to see the exact same thing with a participation plan.
Well, hey, Thurston, just to let you know, in NAVC, we are creating an IPT to come up with something that is a template that's going to be used throughout NAVC contracts. So I don't know if the other commands within the Navy are going to be doing the same thing, but I can tell you in NAVC, we're coming up with a template for our
And-
commitment documents.
Okay, that would help a
Same.
lot. It would take a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Same for USACE. Dave, we should talk.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Hey, I did want to add one more thing. I know I had a final comment, but one more final comment. If you're having a tough time finding small businesses, use that agency small business deputy to help you find those small businesses. Because we all have a list of small businesses that we've worked with that we would love to share with you guys, because it's going to help you guys, it's going to help those other small businesses, and overall it's going to help the government as well. So use us, we can help you.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Aaron, maybe do you want to take us, make a final comment and take us home, turn it over to Kay?
Yeah, well, I could tell you, this is a great panel, and what you folks are saying is definitely relevant. I think the need for like corporations to share best practices and come together to kind of find new contractors out there is a great idea. I'll tell you just again, because I'm from the automotive industry, as much as the automotives hate, well, if you got their sales teams together, as much as their sales teams hate each other, when it comes to supplier diversity, we're all friends. And so there's an automotive industry group. And so what happens is the auto industry will actually support each other in holding these outreach events to the diversity community. It's typically free. And it's kind of like a reverse trade show where they get all of their contractors out there on site. And on the blackboard, they list, these are all the commodities and services that we need to fulfill our contracts. And then it's people who are walking the floor who are small businesses can see that, and they go over and talk to them. And usually these companies really follow through with it, because they're out there because they actually have hard targets that they have to reach. So having these sort of outreach events is just great. So collaborating with each other, I think, is just an awesome opportunity to take advantage of.
Kay, you need to unmute.
I guess I better unmute first. Thank you so very much. It's really been a pleasure. I think we're going to need to do this this type of a forum again, only maybe earlier in the day so that we can run it into our lunch hour instead. I think we could probably keep going with the questions and the knowledge that's on this team here. So thank you so much. And before we sign off, I want to share some information that came in a little bit ago. We are in the presence of someone who just got recognized as the Small Business Program Office for the Air Force, part-time Small Business Specialist of the Year for FY20. Congratulations.
Oh,
Michael.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you embarrassing me, Kay.
Anytime.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Well done.
That's pretty exciting. So I think it's well deserved. So, let's see. And I realize we have some folks that have dropped off because they've got other commitments, and I totally respect that. If we still have SBA on with us, I would welcome them to come back up so that they can address a couple more questions and share some more. There they are. I just have to move this other page. Let's see. I see that you had gone into the question answer section and highlighted some things that you were interested in answering. Do you want to go back to that, or do you want me to read that? I'm sorry, I've got a dog talking to me.
Yeah, if you'd like to maybe bring up the ones that are still outstanding, Randy and I are happy to try and take those on. Okay, you're muted.
There we go. Got one that says Yuri is typing an answer. It says, is it true that being a certified woman-owned small business doesn't mean that they are small for the primary NAICS code? They are only certifying that they are a woman-owned small business?
Right. Oh, that might be one that I started to type and then I got pulled away at something else. So if they receive third-party certification, I would carefully look at the certification, the certificate for it, because it might simply be certifying that they are women-owned, and that maybe they're small in a particular industry. So I would just be very careful to look at the wording of that.
Thank
And
you.
to footstep on that, they should be listed in DSBS prior to award under the NAICS code that they're and SAM under the NAICS code that they're certified for.
Exactly. So yes, it's important to kind of check and double check what people are claiming. Okay, I've got this one here that said, Randy Miller would like to answer this question live. So just to clarify, if a client goes through a third-party certifier, they still have to go through the SBA process again. I think we asked that one earlier. So
Yeah, I think I did answer that live. That's why I clicked on it, that we answered it live. Yes, after the third-party certifier process is finished and they have their certificate in hand, we highly recommend that the vendor themselves go into beta certify in SBA and initiate the process. Sometimes the third-party certifiers will offer to do that. I highly recommend that the vendor does it themselves. Then they have ownership of that login. They know their login, they know their password, and they're not dependent on anybody else to access that.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm not showing any more unanswered questions in the question answer section. I would say if people have the ability to type into their chat, then go ahead and ask your questions there.
I have two things I'd like to mention. One, the slide presentation that Yuri provided, use those. Those are each one of the slide has a hyperlink to the actual reference. So if you have any questions or want to go directly to the source, use that slideshow and click on those links. There were a couple of questions continuing about liquidated damages. I just like to interject that, and this is my opinion. Liquidated damages will be used in the case of severe abuse. If somebody submits a subcontracting plan and they don't make any attempt at using it, that's when liquidated damages are going to come into play, and CPARs also will be used. Liquidated damages aren't going to be used broadly if someone just barely misses their goaling. And then there was a question offline that I got that was asking about if NMR national or the manufacturer rule and limitations of subcontracting applies under 13.5. Yes, the SAT is the SAT. It's currently $250,000. It doesn't matter that simplified procedures can be used up to 7 million, 15 million. It's still the SAT or the 250,000 simplified acquisition threshold that they apply to.
Thank you very much. And we've got another question that just came in. For the newest FAR provisions, recalculating indirect costs for ESRS reporting, do the exclusions to indirect costs for commercial subcontracting plans apply to calculating the costs for SSRs as well?
I'm not sure of the answer to that. Randy, do you know?
I'm not going to take a stab at it. That I would be guessing, and I'm not willing to do that. I think it's pretty clear in the FR. Dig back into that and see what it says. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. If it's not in the Federal Register notice with the revised regulations, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can contact our specialists behind the scenes for the definitive answer.
Got another question that just came in. We are a prime and placing an order. We are placing a subcontract with a foreign supplier, and because it is foreign, I know that an SVP is not required. The supplier is stating that they are subcontracting out some work to US suppliers. So do we now have to get an SBP from them?
That's an interesting situation.
It depends. In the big picture, does it matter whether you have it or not? It looks like if you're subcontracting with a foreign supplier anyway, that it's not going to have a material effect on what you're delivering. So the answer is probably no, but it depends.
That one might be a good question to talk over with the contracting officer, the contracting
Yeah.
specialist.
I would, yeah. And sometimes we also get the contracting officers calling us to get a further read on it because they might not have a definitive answer either. And we're happy to dive into it and get them an answer.
And that's what I was going to say. All these cases, they're very unique, you know,
Mhm.
right? So it sounds kind of generic, but there are so many variables. Contact us directly with all the details, and we can give you a better answer than it depends.
Thank you so much. So I want to do a quick shout out again as thank you to all the participants and all the attendees. We're going to have another meeting in March. Right now, we're planning to have it the week of Alliance in at the Puyallup Fairgrounds. We would love to do it live and in person, but COVID does get a vote, so there's no promises that it will be live and in person. Even if we did have that benefit, there would also be the virtual opportunity because we're not going to, lock it all down that way. Anyway, I am just absolutely thrilled with everyone's knowledge and sharing of information. I really appreciate all the questions. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you very, very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.